Marshall Peak, Chapter 4925, Money Tree. Thanks to Yang Kai's performance earlier, Nu Yang's attitude towards him became much warmer and friendlier. Moreover, he would glance at Yang Kai from time to time with a thoughtful expression. Leading the Black Ink disciples under his command, Nu Yang left the gambling arena and found a place to rest. He even handed many cultivation resources to Yang Kai so that the latter could recover sooner. Yang Kai could only show a grateful attitude. The truth was that the previous fight against the Bright King Cave Heaven cultivator had not exhausted him to a great extent. He had been holding back his strength all this time, so he only looked like he was in a wretched condition on the surface. Nevertheless, in order not to expose his secret, Yang Kai was forced to suppress his recovery ability as much as possible. In this way, it took him 3 whole days before he returned to his peak. During these 3 days, he repeatedly felt Nu Yang watching him with a vaguely meaningful look. These occurrences made him somewhat vigilant. He even wondered whether he had accidentally revealed his secrets and caused Nu Yang to become suspicious of him. Upon careful consideration though, Yang Kai realized that his worries were unwarranted. He had not made any mistakes, so Nu Yang could not have figured out anything. Even so, he could not understand what Nu Yang was thinking. When Yang Kai opened his eyes on the 3rd day, it was obvious that Nu Yang had been waiting for a long time. Nu Yang's gaze immediately swept in his direction, and he called out, "A1." Yang Kai stood up and cupped his fist. "How may I help you, Master? With your ability, how many battles can you win if you fought consecutive rounds against humans in the same order without any rest?" Nu Yang asked. Yang Kai did not know why Nu Yang was asking about this. He thought to himself that it was impossible for him to lose against opponents in the same order no matter how many of them he fought, but he answered cautiously, 3 battles, at most. Nu Yang raised his eyebrows. 3? Very good. While saying that, he stood up and looked in a certain direction. "I'm going to bring you to a gambling arena. Can you guarantee that you will be undefeated in all 3 battles?" Yang Kai frowned and asked, "This subordinate has just shown his face in the gambling arena a few days ago. Will anybody be willing to be my opponent if we go again now?" His previous battle against the Bright King Cave Heaven cultivator had been witnessed by many Black Ink clansmen. No matter how much he had suppressed his strength, his victory would not change. There might not be anybody who was willing to take up the challenge due to the skills Yang Kai showed in the earlier battle. Nu Yang chuckled, "Rest assured, there will definitely be contenders. Even if there aren't, I'll think of a way. You don't need to worry about this. However, I need you to guarantee me that you will never lose. If you think that you are incapable of continuing, then let me know in advance." He was reluctant to lose a servant like Yang Kai. "Yes," Yang Kai responded. "Let's go." Nu Yang beckoned with his hand and led his Black Ink disciples towards the gambling arena once more. A short while later, they arrived at a crater where 2 Black Ink disciples were fighting. The surrounding area was as lively as ever. This was undoubtedly a death match. The 2 Black Ink disciples were struggling desperately, each unleashing their respective secret techniques and divine abilities. It was an extraordinarily heated battle, and the cheers rang out endlessly from the crowd. After waiting for some time, the fight between the 2 Black Ink disciples finally came to an end. The winner survived, and the loser died. Sometimes, the fate of Black Ink disciples lay at the whims of the Black Ink clan. When the victorious Black Ink disciple left the arena, Nu Yang signaled Yang Kai with a look. Yang Kai immediately understood and flew down into the crater. It had only been 3 days since he last fought a valiant battle here, so many Black Ink clansmen recognized him when he suddenly showed up here. They immediately looked enthusiastic, chatting while watching with great interest. Be that as it may, no Black Ink clansman sent their own Black Ink disciple into the arena. This couldn't be helped as Yang Kai's performance a few days ago had been too extraordinary. If somebody entered the arena without confidence, they would only suffer a tragic end. It was not easy to obtain Black Ink disciples, so the Black Ink clan was not willing to squander them carelessly. Naturally, there were many Black Ink clansmen who showed interest in Yang Kai. It was just that they could only shake their heads regretfully after asking the opinions of the Black Ink disciples under their command. Despite waiting for a while, nobody stepped forward to accept the challenge. Yang Kai remained standing in the middle of the crater, looking rather bored. A Black Ink clansman soon yelled from the surrounding area, "Enyu Yang, nobody will accept your challenge if you send this person into battle. Change him for someone else." Enyu Yang bared his teeth in annoyance. He initially thought that he could get lucky, and a Black Ink clansman who was not aware of Yang Kai's strength would send their Black Ink disciple into battle. Who could have known that there were no reckless fools around today? The Black Ink clansman who witnessed the battle 3 days ago would not be deceived, and those who had not witnessed the battle in person learned about the situation after making some inquiries. Since he could not rely on luck, he could only lure others in with the temptation of profit. Enyu Yang chuckled and spoke in a carrying voice, "It is true that my Black Ink disciple is quite strong. I've never seen anybody else in the same order who is more powerful than him. But, since he is already standing in the arena, it's a pity to leave without even fighting. Let's do this instead. We'll fight a life bout. Whoever wins the battle can go ahead and take him away. Whoever loses the battle will only need to pay me 100 Black Ink coins." As soon as this statement came out, an uproar broke out among the Black Ink clansmen. Enyu Yang's words were too brazen. It was almost like he was implying that it was impossible for his Black Ink disciple to be defeated. A Black Ink clansman immediately asked eagerly, "Enyu Yang, are you serious?" The value of a 6th Order Open Heaven Realm Black Ink disciple was not low. If a 6th Order Black Ink disciple were to be traded, they would definitely be sold for tens of thousands of Black Ink coins. It had to be said that tens of thousands of Black Ink coins would be a sizable chunk of wealth to a high-rank Black Ink clan. Even if they lost, the compensation was not too high. There would not be any deaths either since it was a life bout. In other words, they did not need to worry about their Black Ink disciples dying and only needed to pay 100 Black Ink coins. It was only 100 Black Ink coins. Who could not afford something like that? Even the low-rank Black Ink clansman could bring out 100 Black Ink coins at will. Enyu Yang nodded, "Of course, I'm being serious. That is something I announced in public, so how can I go back on my words?" Upon hearing those words, the Black Ink clansman immediately became agitated and sent the Black Ink disciples under their command into the arena. Dozens of Black Ink disciples instantly took to the air and landed inside the crater. Originally, Yang Kai stood alone in the gambling arena. Now, a dozen or so figures were present. Enyu Yang chuckled, "Are you planning to gang up on me? If that's the case, I will have to admit defeat." Many of the Black Ink clansmen looked around at each other. Nobody was willing to let their Black Ink disciples retire from this battle. It was a great opportunity after all. Therefore, they all waited for the others to withdraw their Black Ink disciples from the battlefield. After a period of stalemate, Enyu Yang came up with a suggestion, "Let's do this. I'll ask my Black Ink disciple to randomly pick an opponent. Whomever he chooses will be the opponent in this battle, so there's no need to argue over this matter. What do you think?" This suggestion naturally received unanimous approval from everybody, so they nodded in agreement. Only then did Enyu Yang lower his head to look at Yang Kai. "Choose one yourself." Yang Kai swept his eyes over the crowd and randomly pointed a finger at a handsome young man. "You." The young man nodded lightly, and the other Black Ink disciples left the battlefield after receiving orders from their respective masters. Soon, only Yang Kai and the young man were left on the battlefield. Enyu Yang said, "Once you're ready, you may start at any time." As soon as those words rang out, Yang Kai slammed into his opponent like an arrow released from the string. His large hand reached out as world force surged around his palm. The young man had obviously seen the battle 3 days ago, so he knew Yang Kai's strength. As soon as he saw Yang Kai making a move, how could he dare to let his opponent approach him? He immediately fled to the back and simultaneously cast a secret technique. The secret technique blasted at Yang Kai, but Yang Kai neither dodged nor avoided the attack and instead threw out a punch. The battle was quite fierce. The young man was quite strong. Having originated from a cave heaven or paradise, he was not an average master. Both parties exchanged blows furiously, allowing the Black Ink clan to enjoy the battle with relish. For Yang Kai, this kind of battle was nothing special. It was just that he needed to moderately show off his strength without exposing too much, so suppressing his power was actually the most difficult part. The intense battle lasted for an incense stick, and in the end, Yang Kai found an opportunity to punch the young man so hard that he coughed up blood and flew out. During that interval, Yang Kai did not pursue victory and simply stood silently in place. The young man gasped for breath for some time before he cupped his fist and flew away without a word. The corners of Enyu Yang's mouth curled into a smile at the sight. After receiving the 100 black ink coins from the master of the black ink disciple earlier, he glanced at Yang Kai questioningly, to which Yang Kai nodded lightly in response. Seeing that, Enyu Yang suddenly became confident and shouted, "The rules for the next battle will remain the same, but the loser will have to pay me 500 black ink coins." Many black ink clansmen were stunned. Generally speaking, black ink disciples would need to rest after each fight. It was not common for them to fight consecutive battles. Of course, it had happened once 3 days ago, the result of which was Lang Ya's black ink disciple from Bright King Cave Heaven being snatched by Enyu Yang. The strength of black ink disciples in the same order did not vary greatly, so it was very difficult for them to bear the burden of continuous battles. Hence, Enyu Yang's practice was undoubtedly reckless. The number of black ink coins might have increased from 100 to 500, but it was still within an acceptable range. 500 black ink coins was not too much. Not to mention, his black ink disciple had already fought once, so his strength must have declined by now. The astonishment of the black ink clan lasted only for a moment. Following that, a dozen or so black ink disciples flew down and stood in front of Yang Kai once more. Yang Kai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At this point, how could he not know what Enyu Yang was planning? Enyu Yang was totally regarding him as a money tree. No wonder he previously asked me how many battles I could last. He even repeatedly told me that I must not lose and to tell him in advance if I was too tired to continue fighting. Despite understanding the situation, Yang Kai could only go along with the arrangement. Fortunately, Enyu Yang only wanted to earn black ink coins, so the battles were not death matches. Otherwise, Yang Kai truly had no idea whether he could kill. The same scene as earlier, along with the same rules. Yang Kai randomly chose his next opponent. The masters of those black ink disciples who were not selected sighed in disappointment, but there was nothing they could do. In their opinion, this was a great opportunity to pick up a bargain. It was a pity that they failed to grasp the chance twice. Be that as it may, reality turned out to be beyond their expectations. At the end of the second battle, Yang Kai won again. Although it looked like the battle had exhausted him, he pummeled his opponent to the point where they were coughing up blood. It was obvious that his opponent could no longer continue the fight. Enyu Yang was smiling so widely that his teeth could be seen. After receiving the 500 black ink coins, he shot another inquiring look at Yang Kai. Yang Kai regretted saying that he could fight 3 battles in a row. If he had known this would happen, he would never have given such an answer. His careless response had made things difficult for him to quit now, so he could only nod lightly in silence. Sitting down cross-legged, he seized the time to recover his strength as though he was extremely exhausted. Many black ink clansmen turned their eyes to Enyu Yang and waited for him to speak, and they were not disappointed as Enyu Yang soon shouted, "This is the last match. The rules will remain the same. If you win, you can take him with you. If you lose, you have to cough up 1,000 black ink coins." Compared to a 6th order open heaven realm black ink disciple worth tens of thousands of black ink coins, 1,000 black ink coins were undoubtedly worth betting on. Especially since Yang Kai had already gone through 2 consecutive battles. The chances of winning were astronomical at this point. Martial Peak, Chapter 4926, Black Ink Nest. Before the third match began, the Black Ink clansmen began to quarrel among themselves. They had watched the previous 2 consecutive battles. Most notably, Yang Kai had been injured during the second match, so his strength would surely have been greatly reduced. In the eyes of the Black Ink clan, it was impossible for him to win the third match. This match was going to be a huge opportunity, so nobody was willing to back down. Although Enyu Yang appeared to be watching cheerfully, he was actually feeling nervous inside. It was true that Yang Kai had given him the signal that he could continue fighting, and it was also true that Yang Kai had demonstrated incredible combat prowess. Even so, he was not confident as to whether Yang Kai could win the third battle. If Yang Kai were to lose, then he would have shot himself in the foot with his actions. At any rate, now that things had reached this point, his only option was to persevere. This was a matter concerning 1,000 black ink coins after all. If this method was feasible, then he would never need to worry about black ink coins again in the future. The black ink clansmen quarreled endlessly among themselves. In the end, they decided to follow the original rules and allowed Yang Kai to pick his own opponent. The opponent would be fighting whomever he chose, and nobody could object to his decision. When the third battle began, everybody paid close attention to the fight, with Enyu Yang looking the most nervous out of them all. The situation on the battlefield changed rapidly. The two black ink disciples exchanged countless blows with each other, and the battle was astoundingly intense. Yang Kai once again transformed into his half-dragon form. His performance made it seem as though he had played all his cards, but the fight left him drenched in blood nevertheless. He looked like he was at risk of dying at any moment. Enyu Yang felt his heart sinking in his chest. He was starting to think that he was going to lose the battle. On the other hand, the opponent's side was in high spirits because he could almost see the scene where he obtained a new and powerful black ink disciple. However, accidents always occurred when they were least expected. The opponent had clearly been holding the upper hand in the battle, but he experienced a sudden turn of events. In spite of the fact that Yang Kai had been fighting for 3 consecutive battles and looked like a wretched mess as a result, his attacks only became increasingly aggressive the further he was pushed into a corner. When the opponent fell out of the sky and crashed into the ground unconscious, the entire gambling arena fell silent. Yang Kai also fell out of the sky at the same time, but he managed to stay on his feet at the last moment. His complexion was as white as a sheet. "We won," D4 shouted from beside Enyu Yang. Enyu Yang also burst into cheerful laughter, his tense mood finally relaxing. The other party handed over a space ring. Enyu Yang took the space ring and checked the amount. After confirming that there were indeed 1,000 black ink coins, he smiled and said, "My respect." The black ink clansman's expression was indifferent. The loss of 1,000 black ink coins might hurt slightly, but the damage was not significant. He nodded lightly in response. "Are you interested in another match?" Enyu Yang immediately shook his head. While he regarded Yang Kai as a cash cow, he was not a fool. Yang Kai was no longer in a state to continue fighting. If he fought another battle, he would definitely lose. How could Enyu Yang agree to such a proposal? The black ink clansman added, 2,000 black ink coins. Enyu Yang continued to shake his head. "Even if you offer me 5,000 black ink coins, I won't accept the challenge." Nevertheless, he did not cut off the possibility of future negotiations and reassured the other party with a smile, "Until next time. There will certainly be chances to have a rematch in the future." Having said that, he turned around and instructed D4, "Bring him back." D4 accepted the command and flew towards the crater to bring Yang Kai back. Enyu Yang did not stop there. Leading his black ink disciples, he returned to the place where they rested previously and handed some resources to Yang Kai for cultivation and recovery so that his wounds could heal. Yang Kai had earned Enyu Yang a total of 1,600 black ink coins from the 3 battles earlier. The amount might not be much, but this was not a one-time gig. What was there to fear about the lack of black ink coins if he repeated this cycle a few more times? Looking at Yang Kai, who was meditating in a cross-legged position nearby, Enyu Yang felt as though he could see a method to earn a fortune. A few days later, Enyu Yang led Yang Kai and others to the gambling arena again. Armed with the previous experience, he showed significantly more confidence in Yang Kai this time. Yang Kai had shown off his great strength after winning 3 consecutive battles a few days ago, so the Black Ink clan and the Black Ink disciples knew that he was not an easy opponent to mess with. Be that as it may, most people believed that they might get lucky and had thoughts such as, "What if I strike gold?" In any case, the losses were not too high even if they didn't win the match. That was why, as soon as Yang Kai entered the battlefield, several Black Ink disciples immediately flew into the crater under the command of their masters. Enyu Yang's rules did not change. All 3 matches were life bouts, and the bet increased with every round. The first match was 100 Black Ink coins, the second match was 500 Black Ink coins, and the third match was 1,000 black ink coins. The number of black ink disciples in the battlefield increased with every round, and Yang Kai would randomly choose an opponent each time. The 3 battles eventually ended with 3 consecutive wins. Just like before, Enyu Yang earned 1,600 black ink coins. He was overjoyed. For the next month, Enyu Yang would lead Yang Kai to the gambling arena every few days. It was the same experience every time. Yang Kai never disappointed him. This black ink disciple was definitely his greatest treasure that would bring him enormous wealth in the future. Enyu Yang secretly rejoiced that he had accidentally picked up this servant while resting inside the black ink cloud back then. In just 1 month, Yang Kai became famous throughout the Fierce Wind Estate. Be it the high-rank black ink clansmen or the black ink clan feudal lords, all of them were paying close attention to him now. They had never seen anyone who could defeat so many black ink disciples before. Most of the black ink clansmen here had participated on the real battlefield in the past. To survive and return from the battlefield meant that they had battled and slaughtered human cultivators. It had to be said that the situation would be very terrifying if all the human cultivators were like Yang Kai. Even black ink clan feudal lords took the initiative to meet Enyu Yang and made their intentions to purchase Yang Kai clear. The price they offered was very reasonable. Generally speaking, a black ink disciple in the 6th Order Open Heaven realm would be worth 10,000 or so black ink coins. Nonetheless, many of the black ink feudal lords offered a price of 20,000 or even 30,000 black ink coins. Although Enyu Yang was tempted, he refused all their offers in the end. A one-time sale could never be as beneficial as long-term financial stability. He had far more plans to implement, so how could he sell Yang Kai off? However, on a certain day 1 month later, nobody stepped up to accept the challenge when Enyu Yang brought Yang Kai to the gambling arena. After so many battles, Yang Kai had not lost a single one. He would fight 3 consecutive battles each time, and he would look as though he was on the verge of losing every time. Be that as it may, he would always win in the end. The Black Ink clan had also noticed this issue and began to suspect that Enyu Yang was digging a pit for them to jump into. Therefore, they all cursed Enyu Yang for being insidious and cunning. Since it was a battle they could not win, who would willingly give money away for nothing? There was nothing Enyu Yang could do if nobody accepted the challenge. After waiting for some time, he summoned Yang Kai back and left the gambling arena with his subordinates. His efforts during this period had indeed allowed him to gain enormous benefits. In the beginning, Enyu Yang did not have many assets, but now, he had enough for him to carry out something important. Silently following behind Enyu Yang, Yang Kai vaguely noticed that they seemed to be heading towards the Black Ink nest. He had secretly observed the Black Ink nest on many occasions during the time he lived in Fierce Wind Estate. D4 had mentioned that it was the place where all Black Ink clansmen were born. The Black Ink nest was not only an important foundation of the Black Ink clan, but the advancement of a Black Ink clansman's cultivation must also be done inside a Black Ink nest. Entering a Black Ink nest cost Black Ink coins. Even purchasing world spheres required Black Ink coins. That was why the Black Ink coins were considered so valuable. Yang Kai was very concerned about this Black Ink nest. Unfortunately, he had not had the opportunity to approach it previously and could only watch from afar. It could be said that he finally obtained what he wished for. The group soon arrived in front of the Black Ink nest under Enyu Yang's guidance. From a distance, the Black Ink nest resembled a huge flower bud. Rich black ink strength tumbled about and dissipated into the surroundings with every breath it took. Standing in front of the Black Ink nest, Yang Kai finally realized how large it was. The thick roots were closely connected to the entire Fierce Wind Estate, and its existence was like a plant, but not a plant. The external surface looked like dried meat, which gave off an extremely malevolent aura. Meanwhile, the thick roots themselves were natural pathways leading upward to a portal at the bottom of the flower bud. A Black Ink feudal lord was standing guard beside the portal. Enyu Yang stepped forward and bowed respectfully to the Black Ink feudal lord. Then, he handed over a space ring filled with a certain amount of Black Ink coins. The Black Ink feudal lord checked the contents carefully before he nodded lightly. Enyu Yang turned around, looked at his Black Ink disciples for a moment, and reached out to point at C3 and D4. "You two, follow me inside. C3 and D4 responded in unison and followed NU Yang inside. Before leaving, D4 cupped his fist at Yang Kai. Take care. Yang Kai furrowed his brow slightly. Although he looked confused, he returned the courtesy. It didn't take long for NU Yang to lead C3 and D4 out of Yang Kai's sight. Yang Kai, B2, and E5 moved to the side and waited quietly. A Black Ink clansman would lead their Black Ink disciples over from time to time. What's more, each Black Ink clansman would take 1 or 2 Black Ink disciples inside the Black Ink nest with them, just like NU Yang. Looking at this scene gave Yang Kai a vague guess about what was happening, but he could not be certain. After enduring for some time, he finally blurted out, "Is Master planning to break through?" NU Yang had spent a lot of Black Ink coins to enter the Black Ink nest, so it was obvious that he was here for an advancement. It was obvious that Yang Kai was highly valued by NU Yang, so the other Black Ink disciples had been quite friendly with him recently. Upon hearing the question, B2 nodded in response, "That's right. This is the second time." Yang Kai was stunned. Can a Black Ink clansman fail in his advancement? B2 replied, "Of course there's a possibility of failure. If success was guaranteed for every attempt, then Master would already be a Black Ink feudal lord by now. It's just that the consequences they face if they fail in their breakthrough are not particularly serious. They are very different from us. For us, the higher our order, the more severe the consequences we suffer if we fail a breakthrough attempt. We might even end up dead. In contrast, they will only weaken for some time at most. It's only a matter of time before they make a full recovery." Yang Kai gnashed his teeth. NU Yang was a high-rank Black Ink clansman who was equal to a 6th-order Open Heaven Realm Master in terms of strength. If he succeeded in his advancement, then he would become a Black Ink feudal lord. Yang Kai was not afraid of a mere Black Ink feudal lord, but the stronger NU Yang became, the more disadvantageous it was for him. Naturally, he hoped that NU Yang failed in the advancement. Why did Master take C3 and D4 inside with him? Yang Kai asked in confusion. Logically speaking, the advancement was an extremely important process to both human cultivators and the Black Ink clan. They would need to concentrate fully, so why would NU Yang take 2 Black Ink disciples inside with him? Was it for standing guard? But there should not be dangers inside the Black Ink nest. B2 fell silent for a moment before he explained, "Just as how we need to accumulate our strength to advance, the same goes for Master. He brought them along in case of emergency." Yang Kai's facial muscles tightened instantly. B2's explanation might not have been explicit, but how could Yang Kai fail to understand the meaning behind those words? It was obvious that C3 and D4 were being regarded as emergency resources. In a pinch, NU Yang could devour their world force to aid in his advancement. Martial Peak, Chapter 4927, Sweeping Victory. It was not just NU Yang. From what Yang Kai observed just now, most of the Black Ink clansmen who entered the Black Ink nest would bring 1 or 2 Black Ink disciples with them. Through the ages, who knew how many Black Ink disciples from the cave heavens and paradises had perished inside this massive, evil Black Ink nest? Yang Kai clenched his fist tightly. The urge to charge straight in and destroy the Black Ink nest flooded him, but he firmly suppressed the impulse. This was not the only Black Ink nest in the Black Ink clan. Even if he were to destroy the Black Ink nest in front of him, it would not change the fate of many Black Ink disciples. On the contrary, it would only expose his identity. The existence of the Black Ink clan was the root cause of the problem. Only by completely eradicating the Black Ink clan from the world would the crisis faced by the 3,000 worlds since time immemorial be resolved. Yang Kai and the others waited silently, and NU Yang's figure finally emerged from the entrance of the Black Ink nest a few days later. However, Yang Kai immediately noticed that NU Yang seemed rather weak at the moment. Not only was NU Yang's aura fluctuating unevenly, but his expression was also dark and gloomy. It was obvious that he was not in a good mood. Yang Kai's heart stirred at the sight. Combined with what B2 said earlier, how could he not realize that NU Yang had failed his breakthrough? Every time a Black Ink clansman failed during their advancement, they would be weakened for some time. In addition, it was already the second time NU Yang failed. It would be strange for him to be in a good mood. Yang Kai glanced behind Nu Yang. There was a person following behind the tall figure. It was D4. Meanwhile, C3, who went inside with them, was nowhere to be seen. Yang Kai's eyes dimmed slightly. He understood that C3 had probably met a tragic end. Nu Yang might have failed to break through, but he must have devoured the world force of C3's small universe during the process. How could C3 survive when his world force had been devoured and his small universe had collapsed? Although Yang Kai had neither interacted much with C3 nor built up a friendship between them during this period, the death of C3 still weighed heavily on his heart. Nu Yang walked out of the black ink nest without saying a word. Yang Kai and D4 glanced at each other and nodded lightly in greeting. Then, Yang Kai quickly followed after Nu Yang with B2 and E5 in tow. Returning to the place where they rested again, Nu Yang sat down cross-legged. His chest and abdomen swelled as he inhaled the black ink strength that could be found everywhere in the fierce wind estate. As he absorbed the black ink strength, his weakened aura gradually recovered. D4 seemed to be feeling a lingering sense of fear after narrowly escaping death. Even though he had known what kind of fate awaited him when he followed Nu Yang into the black ink nest, it was impossible for a black ink disciple like him to refuse his master's command. Nevertheless, anybody would instinctively feel fear when faced with the threat of death. Even a talkative person like D4 fell into a heavy, brooding silence for quite some time. It was fortunate that Nu Yang had failed in his breakthrough though. If Nu Yang had succeeded, then he too would have shared C3's fate. An entire month later, Nu Yang finally made a full recovery. He slowly stood up and glanced in the direction of the gambling arena. Hesitating for a moment, he eventually shook his head slowly and beckoned to the others, "Let's go." The black ink coins that Yang Kai earned for him in the gambling arena had mostly been spent on the black ink nest. If he wanted to enter the black ink nest again for cultivation, then he would need to earn more black ink coins. Unfortunately, Yang Kai's fame had spread throughout the fierce wind estate. Nobody was willing to fight him again, so this method of making money had lost its effect. If he wanted to earn more black ink coins, then he could only switch to another place and begin anew. That was one of the reasons why Nu Yang had rejected the offers from the Black Ink clan feudal lords when they wanted to purchase Yang Kai at high prices. His subordinate known as A1 was practically a money tree after all. How could he sell off his source of income for a mere 20 or 30,000 black ink coins? The 4 black ink disciples left the fierce wind estate under Nu Yang's leadership and rushed towards a certain direction in the void. More than 10 days later, they arrived at another territory. Yang Kai stealthily checked the universe chart that Meng Qi had given to him and discovered that this territory was known as the False Decree Estate. The False Decree Estate did not look very different from the Fierce Wind Estate. It might be slightly bigger in size, but the difference was not very significant. Standing in the void, Yang Kai saw the towering black ink nest in the False Decree Estate from a distance. The black ink nest was releasing black ink strength that covered the entire spirit province. Upon arriving at the False Decree Estate, Nu Yang headed directly for the gambling arena without pause. There was a gambling arena in almost every territory because the Black Ink clan seemed to like sending their Black Ink disciples into battle. When the battle in the gambling arena ended, Nu Yang shot a look at Yang Kai. Yang Kai understood and immediately flew downward. Then, Nu Yang repeated his previous trick and recited the gambling rules that he used back at the Fierce Wind Estate. It was just that he had increased the compensation for the first match from 100 to 500 black ink coins. His statement caused a huge uproar in the gambling arena. If they won, they could walk away with a 6th order black ink disciple. If they lost, they would only need to pay 500 black ink coins. Who could miss out on such a fantastic deal? Nearly 100 6th order open heaven realm black ink disciples immediately flew into the battlefield under their master's command and surrounded Yang Kai so tightly that not a drop of water could leak out. If somebody did not know better, they would have thought that these black ink disciples were about to gang up on Yang Kai. Nu Yang had long expected this situation as something similar had happened back at the Fierce Wind Estate. Therefore, he applied the same rule and allowed Yang Kai to choose his own opponent. The Black Ink clan naturally had no objections to this. Yang Kai did not hesitate and randomly chose an opponent. When the others left the battlefield, the match immediately began. Needless to say, the results went as expected. Enyu Yang cheerfully received the 500 black ink coins, then he recklessly announced that he wanted to continue with a second match. The bet for the second match was 1,000 black ink coins. The black ink clansmen who failed to seize the opportunity earlier were both surprised and delighted, so they dispatched their black ink disciples into the battlefield again. It was soon time for the third match. Moreover, the wager for the third match had been increased to 2,000 black ink coins. After 3 consecutive battles, a blood-drenched Yang Kai finally withdrew from battle. Enyu Yang happily earned 3,500 black ink coins, which was more than double the income he received at the Fierce Wind Estate. One battle here was equivalent to 2 battles back at the Fierce Wind Estate. The efficiency had increased significantly. Thanks to the bloody battle on the first day, Yang Kai caught the attention of many black ink clansmen. Many people became interested in him. In fact, a black ink feudal lord immediately approached Enyu Yang and expressed his intention to buy Yang Kai. Enyu Yang had already rejected such offers countless times in the Fierce Wind Estate, so naturally he would not agree here either. The black ink feudal lords might hold higher positions than him, but the black ink clan had their own rules. No matter how much one liked another person's black ink disciple, they could not forcefully snatch them away. Otherwise, Enyu Yang would not have been able to hold on to Yang Kai. He allowed Yang Kai to rest and recover for a few days before he brought him back to the arena. A month later, all the 6th Order Open Heaven Realm black ink disciples in the False Decree Estate had been soundly defeated and nobody accepted the challenge again. Enyu Yang turned out to be surprisingly decisive. Once the challengers dried up, he immediately led Yang Kai and the others out of the False Decree Estate and traveled to the next place. At times, Yang Kai had no choice but to admire Enyu Yang's business acumen. Enyu Yang was obviously taking advantage of the lack of information circulation at the moment. Every time they arrived at a new place, the Black Ink clan would be unaware of Yang Kai's strength and as a result, all of them were tempted into taking their chances against him. Who could have known that they would fall into Enyu Yang's trap and contribute black ink coins to him for nothing? In any case, this continuous stream of battles was not without benefit to Yang Kai. Unlike others in the 6th Order, his small universe had fully materialized. Combined with the fact that his small universe had been integrated with the sealed world bead, his heritage had always been far greater than others in the same order from the start. Therefore, he always obtained crushing victories when fighting other cultivators in the same order. Be that as it may, he had to suppress his strength in every battle inside the gambling arenas. He did not dare to expose too much, lest he revealed his secrets to the others. Under the premise that he fought while suppressing his strength, repeatedly fighting battles that culminated with heavy injuries on both parties had the effect of polishing his combat techniques. If that were not the case, Yang Kai would have considered losing some battles a long time ago. Being treated as a cash cow by Enyu Yang was not a pleasant experience. However, things might not be different if he changed to a different master. They did not stay in any of the territories for more than 2 months. It was meaningless to stay any longer, as once people learned about Yang Kai's strength and stopped accepting the challenge, there would be no more black ink coins to earn. It could be said that Enyu Yang swept from one territory to the next with Yang Kai and the others in tow. Furthermore, he earned a huge fortune everywhere he went. For every 3 battles, he would earn 3,500 black ink coins. Even if he could only fight 7 to 8 times in each territory, that was an income of 20 to 30,000 black ink coins. It was an astronomical amount for a high-rank black ink clansman. Yang Kai had been worried that Enyu Yang would attempt to break through again. If that happened, D4 would be in danger, but on second thought, Yang Kai realized that the reason Enyu Yang brought C3 and D4 into the black ink nest with him last time was to prepare for any emergencies. Now that Enyu Yang possessed such a large amount of black ink coins, he could buy some world spheres to use instead of sacrificing a black ink disciple under his command. In a chat with D4, Yang Kai learned that once a black ink clansman failed their advancement, they generally did not choose to try again for the next few decades. That was because the probability of success was much lower. Only once the backlash from their previous failure had been completely removed would they make another attempt. This discovery was a huge relief to young Kai. Nevertheless, passing the days in this manner was not in line with his goal. Meng Qi had sacrificed himself so that the existence of the Void Corridor would remain a secret and young Kai could escape alive. Originally, young Kai was supposed to rush to one of the great passes guarded by the Cave Heavens and Paradises, then confront the Black Ink clan on the battlefield. He was not supposed to impersonate a Black Ink disciple and become the cash cow of a Black Ink clansman. Unfortunately, young Kai did not dare to act recklessly and could only wait patiently. Enyu Yang was a high-rank Black Ink clansman, so it was impossible for him to avoid the battlefield forever. But, as long as he entered the battlefield, then young Kai would be able to find an opportunity to break free from him. 2 years passed by in the blink of an eye. Inside the gambling arena, young Kai was in a closely matched battle with a 6th-order Black Ink disciple. This was already the third fight of the day. Having won 2 other matches earlier, he had already earned 1,500 Black Ink coins for Enyu Yang. The outcome of the third battle involved 2,000 Black Ink coins and even his ownership, so many Black Ink clansmen were naturally paying close attention. Outside the battlefield, Enyu Yang watched the battle calmly. Although young Kai was covered in blood, Enyu Yang was not worried in the slightest. On the contrary, he was cheerfully chatting with his clansmen beside him. That was because young Kai always had such a miserable appearance during the third match of each round of battles. Even though he looked like he was in a dangerous situation where he could be defeated at any time, he always won in the end. In the beginning, Enyu Yang had been extremely on edge whenever this happened. However, he had gotten used to the sight after 2 years. No matter how terribly young Kai seemed to perform, he had great confidence in the latter's victory. Martial Peak, Chapter 4928, A 9th Order Attacks. In the end, young Kai lived up to Enyu Yang's expectations and won the third battle with some difficulty. Before Enyu Yang could receive the bet of the third match though, a sudden change occurred. An extremely violent force surged throughout the territory, and an oppressive force simultaneously descended upon everybody. For an instant, everyone felt as though an entire universe world was pressing down on their heads. Even their bodies involuntarily stooped slightly from the pressure. Countless Black Ink clansmen turned pale. Meanwhile, world force surged and fluctuated turbulently around them. Inside the gambling arena, the blood-drenched young Kai abruptly raised his head to look at the sky. What entered his vision made his expression tense. In the sky, world force that gathered like clouds was so dense that it could be seen with the naked eye. Young Kai was shocked by the sight. Although he had met many high-rank open heaven realm masters in the past, he had never seen such rich and pure world force before. Back in Black Territory, young Kai had been present when countless 8th Order ancestors joined hands to besiege the Black Ink Royal Lord, and the attacks of those 8th Order masters had been absolutely extraordinary. Even so, all those attacks seemed insignificant compared to what he was seeing right now. He did not know what was happening, but the world force visible to the naked eye was clearly the power unleashed by some sort of secret technique activated by a master. Enemy attack. A furious howl reverberated through the world. It came from the direction of the Black Ink feudal lord's palace. Young Kai was stunned for a moment, then he felt a mixture of astonishment and joy. The situation in front of him turned out to be an enemy invasion, and the Black Ink clan's enemy was undoubtedly the masters from the Cave Heavens and Paradises. In other words, the Cave Heavens and Paradises had launched an attack on this place. He was surprised that the masters from the Cave Heavens and Paradises were so bold. It had to be said that he had checked the universe chart when he first arrived here. Although this place was close to the front lines, it could still be considered part of the Black Ink clan's inner region. How could they do as they pleased after venturing so deep into enemy territory? On the other hand, young Kai was happy because the Cave Heavens and Paradises had taken the initiative to attack before he had the chance to follow Enyu Yang to the battlefield. Taking advantage of this chance, he might be able to break free of Enyu Yang's control and follow the masters from the Cave Heavens and Paradises back to the Great Pass. The wind and clouds gathered in the sky above the territory at a rapid rate, and it only took a moment for an enormous and hazy green palm to form. Despite its slow and clumsy appearance, the palm that literally covered the entire sky actually descended at an incredibly fast pace. Before the countless black ink clansmen in the territory had the chance to react, the palm grabbed hold of the huge black ink nest. Then, the green palm clenched tightly and hauled up the entire black ink nest as though pulling up a mountain. Dense black ink strength scattered and gushed out of the black ink nest. Under the impact of the world force palm, the black ink nest turned into dust. Inside the gambling arena, Yang Kai stared in amazement and secretly rejoiced. Everything that entered his vision was beyond his imagination. He had witnessed the power behind an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Ancestor's attacks before, but that was definitely not as ferocious as this offensive. In other words, this attack had to be unleashed by a 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Old Ancestor. No wonder they dared to venture so deep into enemy territory. It turned out that a 9th Order Old Ancestor, an existence on par with a Black Ink Royal Lord, was personally leading the charge. The female Black Ink Royal Lord had caused heavy losses to the Cave Heavens and Paradises despite being greatly weakened after being trapped inside the Black Ink territory for so many years. It was difficult to imagine how powerful she would have been in her prime. Needless to say, a 9th Order Old Ancestor who could rival a Black Ink Royal Lord in strength would not be weak either. Unfortunately, Yang Kai's delight only lasted for a moment as his expression soon turned bitter. That was because the hazy green palm immediately slammed downward after destroying the black ink nest. The incomparably enormous palm was almost the size of half the spirit province. Moreover, the entire palm was formed from a pure and dense world force. If such immense force even grazed him, Yang Kai was not certain that he could survive. It would be too unjust to die because of this palm strike. Fortunately, the Black Ink clan did not sit around waiting for death. After the warning came out from the feudal lord's palace, Black Ink's strength immediately surged and gathered to form an incomparably huge figure that towered into the sky. The figure then raised a hand into the sky to defend against the attack. It was not a real entity, but rather a presence formed completely from the surrounding Black Ink strength. Moreover, it was clearly being guided by the Black Ink feudal lord of this territory. Watching the destruction of the Black Ink nest had enraged countless among the Black Ink clan, so there was no need for any command or dispatch. Regardless of their rank, every member of the Black Ink clan quickly took action, blasting violent attacks at the hazy green palm in the sky. Furthermore, the Black Ink disciples also unleashed various secret techniques and artifact attacks. Colorful lights filled the entire sky in an instant. Nevertheless, the enormous palm continued to press downward. The countless attacks slammed into the palm, causing layers of ripples to appear on its surface, but although these attacks constantly weakened its power, they were unable to stop the palm's downward progress. The huge figure at the feudal lord's palace was the first to bear the brunt of the attack. Despite fighting back with all his might, he was only a Black Ink feudal lord whose strength was equivalent to a 7th Order master's. How could he contend against the power of a 9th Order Old Ancestor? Before the palm strike descended completely, the enormous figure had already bent slightly under the pressure. The feudal lord struggled desperately and roared in defiance, but his avatar composed of Black Ink strength soon exploded into nothingness. Even his true body was heavily injured as a result. It felt like only a moment had passed. At the same time, it also felt like 1,000 years had gone by. The huge palm slammed down. Be it the Black Ink clansmen or the Black Ink disciples, many of them died a violent death everywhere the palm print covered. Only a few were lucky enough to survive. Countless small universes collapsed and the world force within these small universes dissipated. Following a violent earthquake, the entire spirit province broke into pieces. The destructive aftermath spread out into the surroundings after the attack, causing space itself to shake and become unstable. The low-rank Black Ink clansmen didn't even have the opportunity to resist and were wiped out by the fallout of this attack. Only the high-rank Black Ink clansmen with strength equivalent to 6th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters managed to withstand the shockwave. As such, the brutality of the palm strike was clear to see. Everything happened in a flash. Only a few thoughts went through Yang Kai's mind before the aftermath of the attack came crashing down on him. Nevertheless, he could be considered lucky. In fact, It could be said that all the people in the gambling arena were lucky because they were not located within the range covered by the hazy green palm. All of them would have died in the impact otherwise. Even Yang Kai himself would have needed to transform into his Grand Dragon form to survive such a powerful attack. What's more, doing so would only allow him the possibility of survival. Despite not receiving direct damage, the fallout of the palm strike had turned the entire gambling arena upside down. Numerous Black Ink disciples coughed up fresh blood, and even the aura of the Black Ink clansmen churned fiercely. They were obviously having a tough time. The spirit province under Yang Kai's feet shattered, and like a drowning man caught in the tumultuous currents of the sea, he was swept away by the shockwaves and could not control his direction at all. Startled exclamations and horrified screams entered his ears. When he turned to look in that direction, he saw an extremely pale D4 bleeding from all 7 orifices and struggling to hold on. Furthermore, there was a gleaming white light surrounding D4's body. It would seem that he had activated some sort of defensive artifact. On the other hand, the 5th Order Open Heaven Realm Black Ink disciple next to D4 had reacted slightly slower and failed to summon his own defensive artifact as a result. Due to the churning of his aura, he was unable to withstand the bombardment of the shockwave and exploded after a short struggle. The light covering D4's body was also fading away at a horrifying speed, hence, his expression became despairing. With the strength of a 5th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, it was impossible for him to survive the impact without the defensive artifact. Just as he was about to give up and accept his fate, a figure suddenly rushed over and stood in front of him to help block most of the impact. He looked up gratefully. A1. He never imagined that A1 would come and protect him at a critical juncture of life and death. It had to be said that he was standing next to Nu Yang, B2, and E5 earlier. All of them had used various means to save themselves, but nobody even bothered to care about whether he lived or died. Let's go. Yang Kai grabbed D4 by the shoulder. At this moment, he could not afford to care about what secrets he was exposing. Manipulating space principles, Yang Kai quickly moved away. The shockwave continued to follow closely behind him as he flew out. After a few instantaneous movements, Yang Kai finally stabilized his figure and turned to look behind him. A huge light shone brightly approximately 100,000 kilometers away. The place where the spirit province used to exist was now completely devoid of anything. The might of the 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Old Ancestor was absolutely terrifying. The truth was that Yang Kai had not even seen the true appearance of the Old Ancestor up until now. In other words, the 9th Order Master had destroyed the entire spirit province simply by unleashing a secret technique from somewhere far away. Countless Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples also perished in the process. D4 was a little stunned. After being brought here by Yang Kai's space secret technique, he could be considered safe now. It was just that he could not understand how A1 could run so fast. In fact, he had almost thought that he was doomed to die during those fleeting moments earlier. Nevertheless, now was clearly not the time to pursue this matter. D4 gasped for breath slightly before he anxiously said, "We need to hurry and find Master. It's not safe for us out here right now." It was not safe for any Black Ink disciple without the company of a Black Ink clansman. Take the first time Yang Kai encountered Nu Yang for example. A Black Ink disciple without a master would easily attract the greed of a Black Ink clansman. Nu Yang could be considered relatively kind, having only used his Black Ink strength to convert Yang Kai into his own servant. If Yang Kai had encountered a Black Ink clansman with stronger murderous intent, then they might have tried to devour his world force to enhance their own strength instead. More importantly, the Black Ink disciples themselves were absolutely loyal to the Black Ink clan. It was clear to see that D4 was worrying about Nu Yang's safety. Yang Kai turned to look at D4 and thought to himself, "Why should I search for Master? I've never regarded Nu Yang as my master. What's more, I finally obtained this opportunity after waiting for 2 whole years. Why would I stupidly go back to Nu Yang?" Too lazy to explain, he simply said, "Brother D4, I'll deliver you a huge present." D4 was stunned. What? Yang Kai raised both hands as soon as finished speaking, each hand lighting up with a different colored light. Then, he pressed both palms together. When the yellow and blue lights combined, They turned into a pure white light that immediately enveloped D4 on the spot. D4 never imagined that Yang Kai would attack him at this moment, mainly because it was Yang Kai who had saved him just now. If Yang Kai had malicious intentions towards him, there was no reason to rescue him in the first place. Who would be wary of their savior? Enveloped by the white light, D4's expression suddenly twisted in pain and a pitch-black aura seeped out of his body. Swiftly though, his pained expression gradually became calm. It didn't take long before the white light faded away and his true nature was restored to him. He opened his eyes and stared at Yang Kai in disbelief and uncertainty. "Enter my small universe before we talk about the rest," Yang Kai shouted. He had wanted to bring D4 into his small universe a long time ago, but could not find the opportunity. Now that he finally had the chance to be alone with D4, he could not let the opportunity slip by. D4 opened his mouth and said, "Brother A1, you." He was still in a dazed state. The main reason was that so many things had changed so suddenly that he could not adapt to them all. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4929, Hit and Run. In particular, D4 was puzzled by how Yang Kai wanted him to enter his small universe. He knew that Yang Kai was only in the 6th Order Open Heaven realm, and the small universe of a 6th Order Open Heaven realm master was no more than an immaterial existence that could not accommodate living beings. So, how could he enter Yang Kai's small universe? In the midst of his confusion, Yang Kai actually reached out to grab him, opened the portal to his small universe, and unceremoniously stuffed him inside. D4 felt his vision blurring for a moment, then he found himself in another world all of a sudden. Looking around his surroundings, he was filled with utter confusion. A moment later, Yang Kai's soul avatar appeared in front of him and resolved his confusion. In the void, the aftermath of the 9th Order Old Ancestor gradually subsided. A large part of the spirit province was shattered, resulting in countless casualties among the Black Ink clan and the Black Ink disciples. Before those who were lucky enough to survive could recover from their shock though, numerous figures appeared in small groups. They silently emerged out of nowhere and charged straight at the survivors. These were the Open Heaven realm masters of the human race, as well as a large number of warships. The brutal attacks that blasted out from the warships sent the surviving Black Ink clan into a panic. This was definitely an attack that had been carefully planned for a long time, so the Black Ink clan was completely caught off guard as a result. Moreover, due to the immense gap in strength, they suffered huge losses in this encounter. With each passing moment, either a Black Ink clansman or Black Ink disciple would lose their life. Whenever a Black Ink clansman died, dense Black Ink strength would erupt from their bodies to form Black Ink clouds that scattered across the void. Similarly, numerous Black Ink disciples perished. The movements caused by the destruction of their small universes reverberated through the void. Even though all the Black Ink disciples were once masters from the various cave heavens and paradises, nobody could afford to show any mercy under these circumstances. As soon as they encountered each other, it became a situation where one party had to die. Yang Kai watched from a distance for a moment before he rushed forward with a flicker of his body. For him, this was an opportunity. As long as he could prove that he was not corrupted by the Black Ink, then he could join the masters from the human race and leave the Black Ink clan's domain. It was not easy to come across such an opportunity. Yang Kai had been serving beside Enyu Yang for more than 2 years now, and during this period, he passed through countless Black Ink clan territories and gained some information from the leisurely chats he had among the Black Ink disciples. Although the human race would occasionally take the initiative to invade the Black Ink clan's domain, these incursions occurred very rarely. One invasion in 100 years would be considered frequent. The main reason was that they could not occupy this territory for long even if their invasion turned out to be successful. Therefore, the Great Pass guarded by the major cave heavens and paradises was the line of defense that they had always steadfastly maintained. Their biggest aim, whenever they launched a raid, was to weaken the strength of the Black Ink clan. Once they killed a certain number of the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples, they would swiftly withdraw their forces. That was why such raids generally did not last for long. More importantly, Yang Kai might not encounter another opportunity this good again if he let this chance slip through his fingers. How could he afford to hesitate under such circumstances? Nevertheless, it was going to be difficult to prove his identity. There was not much time for him to prove his innocence on the battlefield, but it should not be an issue if he could kill a Black Ink clansman in front of a human race cultivator. A true Black Ink disciple was completely loyal to the Black Ink clan, so it was impossible for them to turn against their masters. As soon as that thought crossed his mind, Yang Kai quickly came to a decision. His body swept forward more and more quickly. Under the urging of the space principles, it only took him a brief moment to return to the battlefield with a few flickering movements. Everywhere he looked, Yang Kai could see numerous warship artifacts navigating across the battlefield. Powerful secret techniques constantly blasted out from these warships without pause, giving the Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples endless grievances. There were also many 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters and even 8th Order Masters who either fought in small groups or hunted down enemies on their own. A sharp divine sense locked onto Yang Kai the moment he returned to the battlefield. Immediately after that, he felt his skin tightening as a great sense of crisis washed over him. He turned to look in that direction and saw a woman in white fluttering robes watching him intently with her beautiful eyes, an extraordinary aura pulsing from her figure. Holding a sharp long sword in her hands, she slashed at him without hesitation. Her movements showed no mercy, and the strength she displayed unmistakably belonged to a 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master. The attack contained an overwhelming power, and the sword wave flickered irregularly like the tongue of a spirit snake. Yang Kai could feel an overbearing sense of pressure behind the attack before she even approached him. Shocked, he lowered his voice and shouted, "Senior, stop." A trace of grief and pity flashed through the woman's eyes when she heard those words. Even so, she did not pause her actions. With a flick of her long sword, she transformed it into a sword curtain that shrouded over his head. Yang Kai was desperate to cry but was unable to shed any tears. He knew that the other party thought of him as a Black Ink disciple, which was why she was showing no mercy with her attack. Unfortunately, there was no point in trying to explain himself at this moment. No matter what he said, she would not believe him unless he killed a Black Ink clansman in front of her. He did not know which cave heaven or paradise this woman came from, but her strength in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm was absolutely extraordinary. Seeing the sword curtain that was looming over on him, Yang Kai did not dare to hesitate. He quickly raised his arm and summoned the Azure Dragon Spear before exerting his supreme limitless spear art to its maximum. At this time, his priority was to ensure his survival. It would truly be a huge joke if he was accidentally killed during the confusion and chaos. A series of explosions rang out as Yang Kai's eyes bulged with surprise. He was sent flying backward by a violent burst of power and the vitality in his chest churned restlessly. Dense sword wounds also appeared all over his body, causing his physique to tremble and writhe. This woman is strong. Yang Kai was secretly amazed. Although he was only in the 6th Order Open Heaven realm, he had killed a 7th Order Open Heaven realm master before and had fought many others in the past. He was familiar with the might of a 7th Order Open Heaven realm master. However, he had never come across anyone who could hold a candle to this woman among all the 7th Order Open Heaven realm masters he encountered previously. While Yang Kai was surprised, the woman was even more taken aback. It had to be said that she had been immersed in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm for 3,000 years. Having lived most of her life on the Black Ink battlefield, it could be argued that her strength had reached the very peak of the 7th Order, leaving her just one step away from the 8th Order. On top of that, her combat experience was beyond the comparison of those who lived a comfortable life in the 3,000 worlds. Even though she did not use her full strength earlier, her attack was not something an ordinary 6th Order Black Ink disciple could resist. Since the beginning of the raid until now, more than 26th Order Black Ink disciples and Black Ink clansmen of similar strength had perished at her hands. She was confident that her previous attack contained enough power to take this Black Ink disciple's life. Be that as it may, reality proved to be beyond her expectations. Yang Kai might have been injured, but he survived. This Black Ink disciple seems a little different. The murderous intent in the woman's eyes blazed more vigorously than before. The more a Black Ink disciple stood out from the others, the more she had to ruthlessly kill him here and now. If she failed to kill him here, then her juniors on the battlefield might end up dying to him in the future. However, a loud whistle resounded through the void before she could pursue him once more. Raising her sword before her, she glanced in the direction where young Kai had been sent flying and hesitated for a moment before she turned and left. The loud whistle seemed to be some sort of signal, as after it sounded, all the human race masters slaughtering their way across the battlefield immediately retreated from battle, quickly regrouped, and left like a great gust of wind. They're leaving just like that. It took great effort for young Kai to stabilize his figure. Nevertheless, how could he willingly give up when he saw the situation before him? He quickly chased after them, only to quickly notice something strange behind him, like something was swiftly approaching his position. When young Kai turned to look behind him, the pupils of his eyes contracted at what he saw. A mass of black ink was rapidly permeating the void, flowing like the swift currents of the tide. Consequently, everything was dyed pitch black wherever this mass of black ink went. Moreover, the countless powerful auras hidden inside the mass of black ink made the scalp of young Kai's head tingle with fear. There was one aura in particular, which made him shudder both mentally and physically despite the distance between them. This aura reminded him of the feeling he experienced when he first came into contact with the will of a black ink royal lord. The will was absolutely overwhelming and made him feel as insignificant as an ant. A black ink royal lord is coming. Now that the Ninth Order old ancestor of the human race had made a move, the royal lord of this region could not sit by the sidelines. Only a royal lord could fight back against the Ninth Order old ancestor of the human race. No wonder the human race was in such a hurry to retreat. It turned out that they were anticipating this situation and took the necessary precautions. A Ninth Order old ancestor might not be inferior to a royal lord in strength, but they would only be evenly matched in a battle. This place was still within the hinterland of the Black Ink clan, so while it was okay to launch a swift raid and then flee after obtaining a certain degree of victory, it would not be wise to engage the Black Ink clan in a prolonged battle here. The darkness approached quickly. Almost as soon as young Kai noticed the invasion of the black ink cloud, the darkness was already upon him. He did not dare to make any rash movements and simply stood quietly in place. It didn't take long before black ink strength washed over him like the advancing tide. Gigantic figures of various shapes and sizes rushed past, each one of them exuding a powerful aura. They were the black ink territory lords and black ink feudal lords. These masters had no interest in young Kai and regarded him as insignificant. Although the divine senses of several black ink clansmen probed towards him, they did not take any action against him. Young Kai was secretly grateful for their indifference. A short while later, the black ink tide swirled past him in tight pursuit of the human race retreating in the front and promptly departed into the distance. Young Kai shuddered in fear, but just as he was about to chase after them, a voice entered his ears, A1. Young Kai turned to look in the direction of the sound and felt his brow twitching slightly at the sight. The person calling him turned out to be Nu Yang. I can't believe this guy is still alive. During the chaos just now, young Kai had only focused on protecting D4 and withdrawing from the battlefield. He had not bothered to pay attention to the survival of the others, much less thought about returning to Nu Yang's side. On the other hand, Nu Yang had managed to locate young Kai after some effort. Moreover, B2 and E5 were also by his side. It was just that all three of them seemed to be suffering from varying degrees of injuries and their auras were clearly weakened. E5 seemed to be in relatively good condition, but there were obvious traces of blood at the corners of B2's mouth. Upon further consideration, this was not strange. They had been at the gambling arena when the Ninth Order old ancestor attacked. The impact that struck the gambling arena was relatively small, so it was not strange for those with Sixth Order strength to survive. A hint of hesitation flashed through young Kai's eyes, but in the end, he cupped his fist in greeting, Master. On the other hand, Nu Yang seemed very happy. It's good that you didn't die. Young Kai was his cash cow after all. It didn't matter if any of the other black ink disciples under his command died, but young Kai was the sole exception. That was why Nu Yang began searching for young Kai's whereabouts as soon as the human race masters retreated. It was fortunate that he found him rather quickly. Let's go. Follow me. Nu Yang beckoned and took the lead to charge forward. For the Black Ink clan, It was impossible for them to stand around doing nothing now that even a royal lord had taken action. It didn't matter how much or how little they contributed to the battle, they had to follow their leader to war. Enyu Yang didn't even bother to pay any attention as to whether D4 had survived. In his opinion, the most important thing was that A1 had survived. As for D4, who was only in the Fifth Order Open Heaven realm, it would not matter much even if he died. Conversely, it was B2 who quietly asked Yang Kai, "Where did D4 go?" Yang Kai was silent for a moment before he responded solemnly, "He died." B2 looked a little sad, but didn't say anything more. The three of them followed closely behind Enyu Yang, doing their best to recover their strength as quickly as possible while pursuing the enemy. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4930, Shocking Sword Slash. Along the way, many Black Ink clansmen continuously gathered nearby with their respective Black Ink disciples in tow. These were the survivors of the sudden raid launched by the human race earlier. Several hundred of them soon gathered together like small streams converging to form a great river. Led by one of the Black Ink clan feudal lords, they charged forward aggressively in a mighty procession. Moreover, the number of troops steadily increased along the way. Yang Kai secretly grumbled to himself. He originally thought that he would have the chance to meet up with the human race masters, but the circumstances had changed to the point where he didn't dare to act rashly and could only take one step at a time. All of a sudden, blinding lights bloomed in the distant void and terrifying energy fluctuations that caused a person to tremble in horror simultaneously spread out from that direction. Yang Kai looked up only to see the dazzling light contending with an intense pitch-black darkness that could not be scattered. His expression couldn't help becoming cold and somber at the sight. He speculated that the Black Ink Royal Lord was currently fighting the Ninth Order Old Ancestor of the human race. Nothing else could have created such a great commotion. The leading Black Ink feudal lord obviously noticed the situation too. Shouting for the procession behind him to speed up, he rushed forward to provide reinforcements. Yang Kai, B2, and E5 followed closely behind Enyu Yang, taking up protective positions around the latter, remaining in close proximity at all times. Their pursuit had persisted for several days at this point. Not only did they come across the occasional corpses of the slain Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples, but they also observed the wreckage of the destroyed territories nearby. The human masters had invaded deep into the domain of the Black Ink clan after all, so it was impossible for them to pass through these lands peacefully. All the places where the Black Ink clan generally gathered together had been obliterated in their wake. In addition, there were also fragments of countless warship artifacts. The sight of these warship fragments made Yang Kai's heart grow heavy. He had personally experienced the strength of such warships in the past. The palace artifacts Quan Hui wielded when he led the Heavenly Sword Union to war against Voidland had greatly troubled Yang Kai and the others at the time. Mobile palace artifacts were not only difficult to refine, but the cost to refine them was also astronomical. In the 3000 worlds, ordinary artifact refiners were not qualified to refine such artifacts, and most great forces would not have the financial strength to own one either. In the past, Yang Kai had commissioned Grandmaster Ma Fan to create a mobile palace artifact which was now in Voidland's possession. A mobile palace artifact was a valuable treasure for laying siege to enemies and a powerful weapon that integrated both offensive and defensive abilities. After the Ninth Order Old Ancestor attacked several days ago, numerous palace artifact warships had navigated their way across the battlefield and slaughtered countless Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples. Be that as it may, many of these powerful warships had been shattered and destroyed here. It could be seen that the battle had been very fierce for the human race. Judging from the current situation, the Black Ink clan army had caught up to the human race army even though the latter had retreated in a timely manner. A battle must have broken out between them. Moreover, it was an extremely fierce battle. The number of casualties remained unknown. Yang Kai's group continued to give chase for another 2 or 3 days before, all of a sudden, the leading Black Ink feudal lord changed direction and led the hundreds behind him to the flank. The Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples quickly followed in his lead. Yang Kai frowned slightly at the sight. He had hoped to follow the Black Ink clan army to the front lines of the battlefield and find an opportunity to escape. Who could have expected the Black Ink feudal lord to change directions so abruptly? "Master, are we giving up pursuit?" Yang Kai asked with a glance at Enyu Yang. Enyu Yang did not understand what the Black Ink clan feudal lord was trying to do either, but he answered anyway, "Sir feudal lord must have his own considerations. We only need to follow him. If it were any other Black Ink disciple, he would not have been so accommodating. It was just that Yang Kai was very useful to him, so he was much more tolerant towards Yang Kai's behavior. It didn't take long before Yang Kai understood the reason why the Black Ink clan feudal lord had suddenly changed directions. Approximately an hour later, a raging battlefield came into view. There was a warship artifact there, trying to break out from the encirclement formed by the Black Ink clan army. Blinding lights constantly blasted out from the warship, each one containing terrifying force. Consequently, any Black Ink clansman or Black Ink disciple struck by the beams of light would either perish on the spot or cough up blood from the injuries they sustained. That was the biggest advantage of a warship artifact. Every single attack unleashed by it was equivalent to the full power of a Seventh Order Master. Furthermore, these attacks could be fired continuously as long as the warship was functioning properly. Although the Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples in the surroundings suffered huge casualties, they continued to fight to the death without any hesitation. Countless secret techniques blasted towards the warship, but even so, these secret techniques were blocked by the warship's shield and could only create ripples on its surface. For the Black Ink clan, the fact that the humans had invaded their domain and destroyed dozens of their strongholds was a huge humiliation for them. It had to be said that the humans had been besieged in the various great passes by the Black Ink clan for countless years, so it was very rare for the humans to take the initiative to attack. In any case, their humiliation could only be washed away with fresh blood. For that reason, the Black Ink clan disregarded their casualties and dedicated themselves to destroying this warship that had fallen behind the main force, regardless of the price they had to pay. This battle had probably been going on for a while by now, as the void was littered with the corpses of the Black Ink clan and Black Ink disciples. In fact, there were only a dozen or so survivors at this point. If nobody hindered them, the human masters could likely use their warship to obliterate the remaining Black Ink clan and flee with ease. However, when the group of several hundred people including Yang Kai rushed over, the human masters inside the warship immediately turned pale. What they feared the most had finally come to pass. This place could still be considered to be within the domain of the Black Ink clan, so enemy reinforcements could arrive at any time. They had killed the Black Ink clan surrounding them as quickly as possible in hopes of escaping their predicament even a moment sooner, but who could have known that their efforts would still not be enough? Similarly, Yang Kai was secretly anxious when he saw this scene after following Enyu Yang to this place. He did not know why this warship had been left behind, but the situation on the battlefield was ever-changing, so it shouldn't have been a surprise. Just as the humans were in the process of retreating, the Black Ink Royal Lord had led many masters to pursue them and later engaged the Ninth Order Old Ancestor in battle. It might be that the powerful fallout from the battles between the two parties had impacted the human race army's formation and caused this ship to fall behind. Numerous figures stood on the deck of the ship, their world force surging as they unleashed secret techniques indiscriminately in tandem with the attacks of the warship itself. Their assault continued without pause. A furious roar suddenly rang out, "Kill them!" Under the command of the leading Black Ink feudal lord, hundreds of Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples charged towards the warship like the surging tide. It only took an instant for them to surround the ship tightly. That was not all. The leading Black Ink feudal lord was brave and fierce. With a shift of his body, he immediately rushed towards the ship. His enormous figure erupted with a horrifying force as he swung his fist out, smashing it into the protective shield. At that moment, a shocking sword slash swept out. It was extremely brilliant, so much so that it seemed only this sword light remained in the entire world. Pitch-black blood splattered everywhere as the arm that the feudal lord swung earlier was chopped off on the spot. He staggered backward unsteadily, thick pitch-black blood gushing out endlessly from his severed arm. The pain caused his face to twist hideously, but he still glared grimly at the slender figure standing at the bow of the warship. The figure was dressed in white robes that were untouched by dust and fluttered around her in an ethereal manner. More importantly, she was staring at the feudal lord as though she was looking at a dead man. Yang Kai was astonished. The shocking sword slash earlier had been extremely blinding, so it was only natural that he noticed the attack. At the same time, he also took the opportunity to glance at the master who unleashed the strike. The woman standing at the front of the deck turned out to be somebody he recognized. They could not be considered well acquainted, but they had indeed met several days ago. It was the woman in the Seventh Order Open Heaven realm who tried to take his life the other day. If not for the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm old ancestors' signal to withdraw, this woman in the Seventh Order would not have stopped back then. Yang Kai never imagined that he would encounter her here, so he could only marvel at how unpredictable fate could be. Her current situation was clearly a little less than optimistic though. The warship she was on was very powerful, and the human race also had a number of people on their side. Nonetheless, the Black Ink clan had received hundreds of reinforcements out of the blue. As long as the Black Ink clan could delay things here for a short while, even more reinforcements were bound to arrive. The people aboard the ship would not be able to escape if that were to happen. Although the warship was large, it moved as smoothly as the wind under the control of the human masters. Relying on its unparalleled and unmatched defenses, it shuttled back and forth among the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples. At the same time, horrifying lights blasted out from all directions of the large ship. From time to time, the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples would be struck by those beams of lights and lose their lives on the spot. Naturally, the Black Ink clan did not sit around and do nothing as they unleashed their respective means in retaliation. For a time, both sides attacked furiously, making the scene extremely chaotic. Likewise, Yang Kai randomly unleashed various secret techniques, but did not dare to exert his full strength. How could he actually attack his comrades? It was enough if he just put on a show. At the moment, he was currently wondering whether he should take the opportunity to fight his way over to the human race, prove his identity to them, and join their ranks. However, the idea only flashed through his mind for a moment before he dismissed it. He had already suffered a loss previously. When he first encountered the Seventh Order Open Heaven realm woman, he had wanted to prove his identity, but who could have known that the other party would not give him the chance to explain himself? Standing in the other party's shoes, Yang Kai could understand the reason behind her actions. The Black Ink disciples looked no different from ordinary humans in terms of external appearances. For the humans who invaded the Black Ink clan's domain, they could not afford to hesitate in the slightest when facing either the Black Ink clan or the Black Ink disciples. On a battlefield like this, the slightest hint of hesitation could lead to their deaths. Therefore, as long as the other party was not one of their own, they should kill first and ask questions later. In any case, the chances of making a mistake were basically zero. Throughout history, nobody had ever been as bold as Yang Kai. He had disguised himself as a Black Ink disciple, remained by the side of a Black Ink clansman, and involved himself in various gambling arenas for years now. At this moment, he could only suppress the impulse in his heart and quietly wait for his opportunity. Unfortunately, he soon realized that something was wrong. The warship belonging to the human race might be extremely powerful, but it could not withstand a sustained barrage forever. The light shield that covered the warship was clearly dimming now. The Black Ink clan clearly noticed this fact too, and their attacks became more and more ruthless, adamant to bring down the warship. During this short period, over 100 Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples had perished in the battle. Even Enyu Yang had been hit by one of the light beams, which seriously injured him to the point where he coughed up blood. Yang Kai secretly glanced sideways at Enyu Yang and cursed in his heart, "This bastard sure is lucky. Why won't he just die?" The heavily wounded Enyu Yang no longer dared to step forward in battle. Leading Yang Kai and the others, he constantly avoided any confrontation with the ship. Suddenly, Yang Kai noticed something happening on the ship. The human masters seemed to be arguing among themselves. The woman in the Seventh Order Open Heaven realm standing at the bow said something, which caused the expressions of the people around her to change drastically. They hurriedly tried to persuade her with agitated expressions, however, she slowly shook her head with a firm expression. Yang Kai immediately felt a sense of foreboding wash over him. Sure enough, a short while later, the white-robed woman leaped off the ship. With her sword in hand, she crossed the distance and stood between the warship and the Black Ink clan. Then, she held her sword in front of her chest and slid her finger along the blade with a solemn expression. Following a violent surging of her world force, thousands of sword waves abruptly appeared behind her back. The sword waves trembled slightly, humming with a sound that resembled sad weeping. It was the sorrowful lament of her sword. At the same time, a desolate and chilling atmosphere filled the void, and for an instant, it felt as though time had frozen. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4931, Sword Dragon. 10,000 swords swept out all at once. It was an absolutely spectacular scene. Every single sword wave was as solid as a material object. Moreover, their sharp and unstoppable aura placed heavy pressure on the onlookers. Many of the Black Ink clansmen were frightened by this scene, and for a time, nobody dared to act rashly. This woman had taken the initiative to leap out of the ship's protective range and stand before it. Anybody could see from her actions that she was planning to put her life on the line. On top of that, the attack she unleashed was by no means an ordinary secret technique. It was a divine manifestation. Yang Kai frowned slightly at the sight. When he fought against this woman previously, he had noticed that she was extraordinarily powerful. She was definitely second to none in terms of strength among all the Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Masters that he encountered in the past, and judging by the current situation, it would seem that she truly had a strong capital to rely on. Divine manifestations were exclusive to high-rank Open Heaven Realm Masters. Only a Seventh Order or higher Master could comprehend a divine manifestation that belonged only to them. Furthermore, each person's divine manifestation was different because these divine manifestations embodied the essence of their comprehension of their respective Tao. However, not every high-rank Open Heaven Realm Master had their own divine manifestation. Take Zhuo Quan Hui, who was killed by Yang Kai in the past, for an example. He was a Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master and an inner elder of the Thousand Cranes Paradise. Although he held a respected position, he did not have a divine manifestation. Yang Kai might not have emerged victorious from the battle back then otherwise. The gap in strength between Open Heaven Realm Masters in the same order could be extremely disparate at times, and those who had divine manifestations were often the best among them. In any case, unleashing one's divine manifestation could only mean that the person in question was prepared to go all out. Yang Kai also had two divine manifestations: Golden Crow casts the sun and Towering Evergreen. Be that as it may, his situation was unique. Before he even advanced into the Open Heaven realm, he had already comprehended a divine manifestation while still in the Emperor realm, and it had remained one of his trump cards even today. Strictly speaking, Yang Kai's Sun and Moon Divine Will could also be regarded as a divine manifestation because the power behind it far exceeded that of any ordinary secret technique or divine ability. It was just that nobody had ever explained the intricacies of divine manifestations to him before, so he could not be too sure on its classification. The 10,000 swords roared in unison as the woman's expression became even more solemn. Meanwhile, on the ship behind her, the people who quarreled with her earlier looked on anxiously and constantly stomped their feet in frustration. Even so, they were powerless to do anything. In the next moment, the ship abruptly shot out to forge an escape path. Transforming into a stream of light, the ship quickly fled into the distance. The woman was left alone to face the hundreds of Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples, but she showed no fear whatsoever. Her courage and will were incredible indeed. Yang Kai suddenly understood the reason for the dispute earlier. The warship had been surrounded by enemies, so it was impossible for them to escape unless they killed the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples in front of them. However, doing so would only further delay them. If more reinforcements for the Black Ink clan arrived during that time, then they would lose their chance to escape forever. The woman clearly wanted to stay behind and stop their pursuers so that the ship could escape. That was the reason behind their earlier argument. It was almost certain she was a stubborn and determined person, so without giving her comrades any chance to object, she had taken the initiative to leap off the ship and summon her divine manifestation. In this way, the ship only had two options. Either they stayed behind and fought with her, or they took the chance to escape from the battle. The risk of them being wiped out if they chose to stay behind was high, while on the other hand, they would have a glimmer of hope to survive if they chose to escape. There were times when choosing to escape from battle was not an act of cowardice. Quite the opposite, their actions were taken to ensure their comrades' sacrifice would not become meaningless. Besides, escaping while having to abandon one's allies carried both a physical and mental burden that was not easy to alleviate. As the saying went, a strong man would make a prompt and resolute decision. This woman had risked her life just to create an opportunity for her comrades to escape. It was for that reason that Yang Kai felt a sense of admiration and respect for her. The warship was planning to escape, but how could the Black Ink clan allow their enemy to flee so easily? Thus, they immediately rushed forward to intercept the ship. Although the woman remained motionless, the sword waves behind her slammed forward with a roar. Fresh blood splattered across the void and severed body parts scattered everywhere as dozens of Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples who rushed forward to stop the ship died instantaneously. Upon seeing this situation, Yang Kai became quite certain that the woman was only one step away from advancing into the 8th Order Open Heaven realm. An ordinary 7th Order master would never be as powerful as her. It had to be said that the Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples who perished were in no way comparable to 7th Order master, but many of them were high-rank Black Ink clansmen who were at least on par with 6th Order masters. Be that as it may, they were totally powerless to fight back under the bombardment of those sword waves. The woman slaughtered them so effortlessly that it almost seemed as though she was chopping vegetables. It was extremely scary. With just one strike, nobody else dared to act rashly again. All the Black Ink clansmen could only watch helplessly as the warship disappeared from their field of vision. When their gazes turned towards the woman again, their eyes were filled with a mix of rage and fear. Attack together! The feudal lord, whose arm had been cut off by the woman before, roared furiously. It would be far too embarrassing if they failed to take down a single human opponent despite their overwhelming numbers. As soon as the words left his mouth, he took the lead to charge towards the woman. Before he even arrived, he swung his remaining fist and a dense cloud of Black Ink strength came crashing down on her. In a battle against the human masters, the Black Ink clan would naturally make use of their innate advantage. The Black Ink strength that they wielded was extremely corrosive. As long as the human master was careless for even the slightest moment, their small universe would be corroded by the Black Ink strength. If that were to happen, they would quickly degenerate into a Black Ink disciple if they did not sacrifice a part of their small universe. Although a 7th Order Open Heaven realm master had a certain degree of resistance towards the Black Ink strength, they could not withstand being in contact with it for extended periods of time. That was the reason why Meng Qi had been reluctant to escape with Yang Kai back then. He knew that he would never be able to escape from the depths of the Black Ink clan's territory without being contaminated again. As long as he left the sealed world with Yang Kai, it would only be a matter of time before he was corrupted by the Black Ink strength and became a Black Ink disciple once more. At that time, the existence of the Void Corridor would no longer be a secret. That was why he decisively committed suicide inside the sealed world to keep the Void Corridor a secret. Following the attack of the Black Ink feudal lord, many of the Black Ink clansmen acted as well. It only took an instant for the entire region to be filled with Black Ink clouds that enveloped the woman from all directions. All of a sudden, a sword cry resounded, accompanied by numerous scraping sounds. Yang Kai focused his eyes and stared into the pitch-black Black Ink cloud. The sight that entered his vision inadvertently caused him to narrow his eyes. The thousands of sword waves that had been suspended behind the woman all this time almost seemed to come alive at this moment. They quickly gathered near her and wrapped around her entire body in the blink of an eye. At the same time, countless sword waves continued to gather. The scraping and clanging sounds that could be heard were caused by the continuous collision between the sword waves. A sensational aura erupted from the depths of the Black Ink cloud, giving off the feeling that the end was approaching. In the face of such a devastating catastrophe, no one had any hope of survival. A ferocious roar suddenly burst forth, like the furious howl of an ominous beast, before a shockwave swept out. As a consequence, the Black Ink cloud enveloping the woman was instantly blown apart, as though struck by an unimaginable impact, and the enormous figure hidden within was revealed. The woman had long disappeared from sight, and standing in her place was a 1,000-meter-long behemoth. The behemoth had a skeletal frame made from metal. Like a giant beast of steel, the surface of its body glowed with a sharp and cold light while the lines on its surface were hard and sharp. It was a dragon. More specifically, it was a sword dragon composed from thousands and thousands of sword waves. This sudden turn of events left the Black Ink clan in shock. Even Yang Kai's mouth fell open in astonishment. You can even do that with a divine manifestation. Everything that entered his eyes at this moment was completely beyond his imagination. The sword dragon that was 1,000 meters long was certainly incomparable to his 20,000 meters grand dragon form, but the oppressive aura coming from the sword dragon was not something his dragon form possessed. Although they could both manifest dragon forms, if it really came down to a battle, Yang Kai estimated that he would be defeated by this woman within 10 moves. It was no wonder she dared to stay behind on her own to stop hundreds of the Black Ink clansmen and disciples. It turned out that she had something to rely upon. Yang Kai took a closer look and discovered that the woman stood inside the head of the sword dragon. Her spotless white robes could vaguely be seen among the gaps in the sword waves. As long as the sword dragon was not destroyed, she would remain safe and sound. Therefore, he felt his anxiety over her safety reducing slightly. The changes occurred so suddenly that the many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples rushing towards her were too stunned to change the direction of their movements. Under the leadership of several Black Ink feudal lords, they blasted out numerous secret techniques at the sword dragon. In response, the sword dragon moved. The dragon head swayed from side to side, lunging forward at the nearby Black Ink clansman. The sword waves that formed the dragon vibrated extremely fast, resulting in a sharp humming sound. At the place where both parties collided, the sword dragon opened its mouth and swallowed up the one-armed feudal lord who stood at the forefront in a single gulp. Vague roars and screams of the feudal lord coming from the belly of the sword dragon rang out in the next instant, but the screams stopped abruptly not long after and a cloud of ink-colored blood mist burst out from within the dragon. What followed could only be described as a massacre. Everywhere the sword dragon passed, Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples were practically powerless to fight back. They were wounded when touched, and some were even torn apart on contact. Although countless attacks struck the body of the sword dragon, these attacks only destroyed some of the sword waves and could barely deal any damage to the woman's true body. Like cavalry charging through the front lines, the sword dragon swept through the hundreds of Black Ink clansmen before immediately turning around and crashing through their ranks again. Following the sword dragon's first charge, the tight formation of the Black Ink clan fell apart. They couldn't help feeling terrified and escaping in a fluster when faced with such a brutal divine manifestation. However, their actions only gave the sword waves a chance to break through their defenses once more. Numerous divine abilities and secret techniques incessantly blasted towards the body of the sword dragon. On that chaotic battlefield, a life was lost with every passing moment. Pieces of flesh and pitch-black blood scattered across the void. Furthermore, the energy from the collapse of many small universes resounded violently. The sword dragon swept back and forth, charging through the Black Ink clan army 7 or 8 times in quick succession. Out of the hundreds of Black Ink clansmen, more than half died and the remaining half looked as terrified as wild beasts running from a flood. The might of the sword dragon was truly awe-inspiring and the sight left Yang Kai sighing in amazement. There was only one thing that upset him slightly. Enyu Yang had no special ability to speak of, but his ability to stay alive was definitely first class. 3 or 4 feudal lords had already been killed by the woman, but despite harrowing odds, Enyu Yang remained perfectly fine. He somehow managed to avoid the sword dragon's attacks and survive every single time. At this point, Yang Kai was tempted to just summon his Azure Dragon Spear and kill Enyu Yang himself. After such a high-intensity battle, the sword dragon was naturally not unscathed. The final resistance of the Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples before their deaths was particularly fierce. Coupled with their constant bombardment of secret techniques and divine abilities, the majestic sword dragon looked rather ragged at this moment. It was full of holes and missing pieces. A large part of the dragon head where the woman was hiding had also been blasted apart by the constant attacks, revealing her figure to the world. Her complexion was pale and her aura was unstable. Activating her divine manifestation for such a long time must have been a great burden on her. She had intercepted and slaughtered more than half of the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples here all by herself. Moreover, quite a few of them were Black Ink feudal lords who were equivalent to 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters in strength. Having such achievements was truly remarkable. However, for her, this was only the beginning of her struggle. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4932, backed into a corner. The woman's vulnerability did not escape the notice of the many fleeing Black Ink clansmen. Although they had originally been filled with the terror of death, they seemed to see a glimmer of hope at this moment. 4 Black Ink feudal lords had survived up until this point. They exchanged glances and immediately understood each other's intentions without the need for discussion. Many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples had died at the hands of a single human. Their casualties were extremely heavy. If they allowed the enemy to escape on top of that, then it could only be said that they were far too incompetent. More importantly, they would not have a reasonable explanation for their higher-ups. It would be difficult for them to escape punishment if their superiors were to hold them accountable for this incident. Hence, their sole option was to take down this woman with all their might. Killing her here was the only way for them to wash away their shame. With that goal in mind, the fleeing Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples gathered together again. They split into several groups under the leadership of the remaining few Black Ink feudal lords and moved in different directions to surround the battered sword dragon. All of them had a deep understanding of the sword dragon's might. Out of the original hundreds of people on their side, more than half had been killed by the repeated assault of the enemy. How could they not realize the tyrannical might of the enemy at this point? For that reason, the Black Ink clansmen blocking the way immediately scattered in all directions when the sword dragon came charging in their direction. At the same time, the others fiercely unleashed various attacks at the sword dragon's body from a distance. After this maneuver was repeated a few more times, the results were as expected. The sword dragon not only failed to kill many Black Ink clansmen, but the condition of its battered body deteriorated even further instead. Conversely, the encirclement stood strong whenever the sword dragon stopped moving. They were giving the woman no chance of escape whatsoever. Despite everything, the woman's pale face remained utterly indifferent when she looked at the Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples surrounding her. It was almost as though she was not the one in crisis. Cracking sounds rang out again and the sword waves that made up the sword dragon twisted and changed their form once more. Under the stunned gazes of the Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples, a brand new and perfect sword dragon was born. It was just that the sword's waves forming the sword dragon had suffered extensive damage earlier, so the current sword dragon was barely half the size of the previous sword dragon. Be that as it may, it was still over 500 meters long. Yang Kai felt his admiration and respect for this woman deepening greatly. Prior to this incident, he had never even imagined that a divine manifestation could be manipulated in such a way. It went to show just how powerful she was. Her control over her divine manifestation had reached the point where she could wield it like an extension of her own body, which also meant her attainments in the sword Dao were extraordinary. The sword dragon charged forward once more. The current dragon form was a little smaller than before, but it remained enormous compared to the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples. Moreover, it was much more agile than before. Be that as it may, the Black Ink clan continued with their established tactics to drag out the battle. They refused to have a direct confrontation with her and simply fought with the intention of wearing her down. For a time, the woman was also extremely troubled by these tactics. She could not kill many of her enemies even though she charged forward repeatedly. On the contrary, the body of the sword dragon became battered again. The repeated confrontations and stubborn resistance allowed the woman to stop the pursuit of hundreds of Black Ink clansmen with her strength alone. At this point, the 500-meter sword dragon had transformed once more and shrunk to just 100 meters in length. She would soon lose her ability to maintain the sword dragon form if the situation persisted. In her weakened state, Only a tragic fate awaited her once she lost the protection of her divine manifestation. Nevertheless, she had achieved her purpose of delaying the enemy. Regardless of her survival, the people on the warship would be able to escape safely. At this moment, anybody could see that she was trying to break out of the encirclement and escape. However, the Black Ink clan had paid a heavy price just to force her into a corner, so how could they allow her to escape? Many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples continued to die, but the encirclement remained tight. They were not giving her the slightest chance to flee. Yang Kai was feeling extremely conflicted inside. Watching the woman fighting alone, he was tempted to reveal his identity and fight beside her. Be that as it may, the thought only passed through his mind for a fleeting moment before he rejected the idea. Even with his help, she would have a hard time pushing back her enemies in this situation. He was only in the Sixth Order Open Heaven realm after all. How could he win against so many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples? What's more, it would be difficult for him to gain her trust in such a short time. On the contrary, if he continued hiding, he might be able to find an opportunity to turn the situation around. The 100-meter-long sword dragon had been reduced to tatters and the woman was clearly an arrow at the end of its flight, her ashen complexion seeming completely bloodless. Upon seeing this situation, the attacks of the many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples became increasingly vicious. All of a sudden, the sword dragon suddenly turned around and charged towards Yang Kai's position, causing the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples around him to turn pale in fright. Enyu Yang was the first to dodge to the side. It had to be said that he might not be particularly skillful in anything, but he was very good at avoiding danger in a timely manner. Nobody expected the sword dragon to charge in this direction because Yang Kai and the others were on the rear side of the encirclement. All this while, the woman had never bothered to target this area. She had repeatedly charged towards the front lines in order to break free of the encirclement and return to the human race army, but her wish never came true. Her sudden and opposite behavior was certainly very unexpected. Yang Kai even suspected that her previous actions were simply to mislead the enemy. Her real target had always been the rear of the encirclement. Many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples quickly retreated. On the other hand, the Black Ink feudal lord leading this side only hesitated for a moment before he rushed forward with a furious roar. It was not as though he did not know how strong the woman was, however, it was obvious that she was a dry oil lamp after fighting for so long. How much more strength could she exert? What's more, he had great confidence in his own strength. As long as he could delay her for a moment, his clansmen from the other side would surely come to his aid. His self-confidence would be his undoing though. The 100-meter-long tattered sword dragon spun like a top and collided with the Black Ink feudal lord. Without a sound, the feudal lord became a cloud of pitch-black blood mist and perished in an instant. Even the high-rank Black Ink clansmen and the Black Ink disciples behind him suffered significant casualties. Enyu Yang had evaded in time, so he was completely unharmed. In contrast, Yang Kai had failed to make a timely retreat because he had been worrying about the woman's safety. He was wounded after being brushed by the sword dragon as it flew past. A gash deep enough to show bone appeared on his chest, and blood gushed out of the wound. His golden blood was so striking that the woman couldn't help but glance in his direction. When their gazes met, a look of obvious astonishment flashed through her eyes. She had not noticed his presence due to the intense battle earlier, so it was not until this moment that she actually caught a glimpse of him and recognized him as the Black Ink disciple who escaped from her a few days ago. At the time, she had wanted to kill him ruthlessly. It was a pity that she was forced to make a hasty retreat thanks to the signal from the old ancestor. Nevertheless, she only glanced at Yang Kai briefly before she paid no more heed to him. Now was not the time for her to be worrying about such matters. The final struggles of the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples caused the 100-meter-long sword dragon to finally collapse, leaving only a few scattered sword waves around the woman for protection. Her divine manifestation had been completely destroyed, but she broke through the encirclement because of that very reason. Activating the remaining dregs of power in her small universe, she transformed into a stream of light and shot out at a high speed. The Black Ink clan's domain was located in the direction she was flying, opposite of where the human masters had escaped earlier. She had no choice but to make this decision. Her path forward had been obstructed by her pursuers, so she could only make a desperate choice in an attempt to survive this crisis. How could the remaining Black Ink clansmen allow things to go as she wished when they saw that she was attempting to flee? The 3 surviving feudal lords quickly gave chase. Likewise, the rest of the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples followed closely behind. For a time, a cat-and-mouse chase took place in the void. Even though the woman was an arrow at the end of its flight, her speed was surprisingly fast. Wrapped in sword light, she seemed to transform into a sword wave that sliced through the void. The Black Ink clansmen chasing after her could not keep up at all. After leading her pursuers in circles for some time, she abruptly changed directions and fled towards the front lines. Upon seeing this, Yang Kai breathed a sigh of relief. Fleeing deeper into the hinterland of the Black Ink clan would surely lead to a tragic ending. Without the deterrence of a Ninth-Order old ancestor, no matter how strong she was, it was impossible for her to survive by relying on her strength alone. Only by fleeing back to the human lines would she stand a chance to survive. The distance between the 2 parties grew larger and larger, and if nothing unexpected happened, then the woman would be able to escape alive. That was also what Yang Kai hoped to see. However, at that moment, a powerful aura suddenly emerged from behind. Startled, he looked back only to see a pitch-black darkness rapidly approaching them. This horrifying scene was rather familiar. When the Black Ink Royal Lord led a horde of Black Ink clan masters here in a rush, Yang Kai had witnessed a similar scene. Of course, the pitch-black darkness that was rapidly approaching this time was not nearly as large-scale as back then. Moreover, there was only one aura coming from within the darkness. It was a Black Ink territory lord. Yang Kai's heart sank at the sight, and he clenched his fists tightly. A Black Ink territory lord was equivalent to an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master in terms of strength. I can't believe a master of this caliber actually appeared at this time. She's in danger. The woman fleeing in the front clearly sensed the danger looming behind her, and her speed suddenly increased significantly. It was apparent that she was desperately trying to escape. Unfortunately, the territory lord chasing her was in prime condition, so how could she possibly escape his incredible speed? The distance between them quickly closed, and it didn't take long before the pitch-black darkness retracted to reveal the gigantic figure hidden within. The figure raised his hand and slapped at the sword wave that was running away up ahead. The void shuddered from the impact, and Yang Kai clearly saw the sword wave freezing for a moment. Then, the impact forcefully separated the body of the woman who was fused with her sword. Blood mist sprayed from her mouth as a result. Judging from the strength displayed by the woman earlier, at the peak of her strength, she would have been able to fight back to a certain extent even if she encountered a territory lord, but in her current exhausted state, how could she defend against such a blow? Just a single palm strike was enough to heavily injure her. It was no longer possible for her to escape. Still, this woman was very decisive. Knowing that it was impossible to escape, she immediately spun around and fused with her sword again. She transformed into an impressive sword wave that slashed out at the territory lord chasing her. The power behind that attack was enough to shake space itself. It was her final blow into which she poured all her remaining strength. The territory lord stared indifferently at this attack and punched out with his fist. His enormous fist collided with the sword wave. Consequently, the sword wave shattered and scattered like fireflies dancing in the night. His gigantic figure stood upright in the void. Stretching out his hand in front of him, he clenched his fist and captured a small figure in his grip. The woman's pure white robes were stained red with blood, her beautiful hair was completely disheveled, and her weakened aura resembled a flickering flame in the wind that could be extinguished at any moment. Despite facing such a desperate situation, she did not simply sit around waiting for her death. Nevertheless, she could not break free from the territory lord's grasp no matter how hard she struggled. Yang Kai immediately became anxious. In this situation where the woman had been captured, it would only take the slightest pressure from the Black Ink territory lord to crush her to death. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4933, Unexpected Situation. The woman's life was in danger. Yang Kai suddenly couldn't bear watching without doing anything any longer. Even if his identity were revealed, even if his future would be fraught with danger, he believed that he had to make his move now, otherwise, he was bound to regret his decision for the rest of his life. Over the past 2 years, he had disguised himself as a Black Ink disciple and carefully mingled among the Black Ink clan because he did not dare to reveal his identity easily. Being faithful to Enyu Yang's orders and allowing himself to be regarded as a cash cow by fighting endless battles in the gambling arenas of various major territories was simply his methods of survival. He had not lifted a finger to help when the woman had been fighting on her own because she had always remained in control of the situation. However, she was now only one step away from death. Yang Kai could not watch her die here without doing anything. With his current strength, there was a high chance that he would die as well if he revealed his identity. The Black Ink territory lord was not easy to deal with after all, but throughout his life, Yang Kai had to admit that although he was not indomitable, he had a bottom line that could not be crossed. It was now the time where he had to take action. Inside the sealed world, Meng Qi from Exquisite Paradise had chosen to commit suicide in order to protect the secret of the Void Corridor. As a 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, when did he ever show the slightest hint of hesitation in his actions? The people who fought and risked their lives every single day on the Black Ink battlefield to fight the Black Ink clan for countless years did so all to protect the 3,000 worlds, all while the latter knew nothing of their sacrifice. How could he do any less at this moment? However, Yang Kai suddenly froze in place. That was because he noticed that the territory lord who captured the woman was simply staring at her quietly. There was no murderous intent in those eyes. On the contrary, they were filled with a trace of admiration. Yang Kai suddenly realized something. The masters from the cave heavens and paradises might not die if they were captured by the Black Ink clan. Rather, what awaited them was another fate. Sure enough, the Black Ink territory lord did not kill the woman immediately and instead sneered lightly, "You've got guts. In that case, become my slave forever." When the words left his mouth, Black Ink strength dense enough to take shape seeped out of his hands. The Black Ink strength instantly enveloped the woman and began sinking into her body. The woman struggled desperately, but her efforts were to no avail. Combined with the fact that she had exhausted all her strength in the battle just now, she was completely powerless to resist the corrosion of the Black Ink strength. A short while later, she became quiet as her eyes filled with Black Ink strength. Yang Kai watched quietly, feeling sad in his heart. It was hard to believe that such a master had been corrupted by Black Ink strength. Be that as it may, compared to death on the spot, this outcome could be considered acceptable as he might be able to find an opportunity to rescue her. The Black Ink territory lord was clearly extremely satisfied with his newly subordinated servant. A Black Ink disciple in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm was very rare, so they were considered precious even among the Black Ink clan. He studied her for a moment before he said, "Follow me once you recover." "Yes." The woman with disheveled hair bowed respectfully. After that, the territory lord did not say anything else. Pitch-black darkness covered his enormous figure, and he charged forward quickly. It was obvious that he planned to pursue the human masters who had retreated earlier. Meanwhile, the Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples left behind glared at the woman. The situation was extremely awkward, but there was no helping it. They had been fighting each other as though there was an absolutely irreconcilable enmity between them only for her to suddenly become one of their own in the blink of an eye. The shift in her position was rather abrupt. Even so, there was no denying that the woman in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm was now a Black Ink disciple after being corrupted by the territory lord's Black Ink strength. Under normal circumstances, it was easy for such a powerful Black Ink disciple who was acting alone without being accompanied by their master to attract the greed of Black Ink clansmen. However, everybody had just witnessed the territory lord corrupting this woman with his Black Ink strength. Who would dare to steal her away after that? They would not face any consequences if they stole her now, but the territory lord was bound to hold them accountable for their actions later. If that were to happen, they would lose all the Black Ink disciples under their command and possibly even their life. "Why did you run off? Do you want to die?" Enyu Yang reprimanded Yang Kai. In order to rescue the woman earlier, Yang Kai had increased his speed slightly and left his master behind. It was fortunate that he had reacted in time and held back from attacking the territory lord. Otherwise, The person being hunted at this moment would have been him. Hence, he lowered his head silently in response. Thankfully, Enyu Yang only reprimanded Yang Kai once and did not seem to have any other intentions. In that way, the vigorous pursuit finally ended. The 3 surviving Black Ink clan feudal lords gathered together for a quick discussion, then one of them said, "A few will stay behind to guard this place and prevent any misunderstandings from occurring. The rest will come with me to pursue the enemy." The woman in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm had been converted by a territory lord, but she was a dry oil lamp at the moment and needed time to recover her strength. The territory lord had also commanded her to recuperate before catching up to him. Be that as it may, it was inappropriate to leave her here alone. If any other Black Ink clan masters passed by this place and mistakenly killed her thinking that she was an enemy, they would not be able to give the territory lord a reasonable explanation. Therefore, a few people had to stay behind to help her stand guard and explain the circumstances to any passing clansman. Ordinary Black Ink disciples would never receive such special treatment, but they had just witnessed this woman's strength with their own eyes. More importantly, she was personally corrupted by a territory lord. As the territory lord's Black Ink disciple, it was only natural for her to receive special treatment. After the feudal lord finished speaking, his gaze swept across the crowd in front of him. Enyu Yang dutifully stepped forward at the right moment and volunteered, "Sir, I'm willing to stay behind." Yang Kai glanced sideways at Enyu Yang. During the 2 years serving under him, Yang Kai had not realized that Enyu Yang was extremely scared of death. It was not until this battle against the human masters that Enyu Yang's cowardice was revealed. In addition, Yang Kai had noticed something earlier. Although Enyu Yang had no special abilities to speak of, his ability to sense danger and escape it were definitely first class. In other words, his ability to survive in the Black Ink battlefield up until today was not without reason. Hearing that somebody was required to stay behind, how could Enyu Yang fail to seize this opportunity? He quickly volunteered before anybody else could even react. It was not a major issue that needed to be negotiated, and since he took the initiative to volunteer, the other Black Ink clansmen would naturally have no reason to compete with him. The feudal lord who spoke earlier nodded and responded, "In that case, you will stay behind. The rest will come with me." After saying that, he took the lead to charge forward in pursuit. The others quickly followed behind him, and it didn't take long before only Enyu Yang, Yang Kai, and the other Black Ink disciples remained. "Let's take a rest. I'm sure you're all tired from the battle earlier. It's good that none of us died." While speaking, Enyu Yang turned to look in the woman's direction with a thankful expression. Several Black Ink feudal lords and countless high-rank Black Ink clansmen had died at the hands of this woman, therefore, Enyu Yang was very lucky to have survived. What made him rejoice even more was that all the Black Ink disciples under his command had also survived the battle. They sat down cross-legged and consumed some spirit pills for recovery. On the other side, the woman in the 7th Order Open Heaven realm had been quietly recovering her strength ever since the departure of the territory lord. From time to time, Black Ink clansmen of varying numbers would rush over from behind. When they stumbled upon this place, they couldn't help feeling curious and came forward to ask about the situation. Naturally, Enyu Yang answered their questions truthfully. After hearing that the disheveled woman recovering her strength was a Black Ink disciple converted by a territory lord, they immediately gave up any ideas about her and left quickly. After just half a day's time, the woman opened her eyes under Yang Kai's close watch. Her originally ashen complexion had already returned to normal. She casually tied up her hair and slowly got to her feet, and then she walked over to Yang Kai and the others. The crimson patches that blossomed all over her white robes were extremely striking. Enyu Yang had also gotten to his feet after he noticed her movements, but his smile was rather forced. "Have you recovered your strength?" He fervently wished that the woman would take as much time as possible to recover. In that way, he would no longer need to chase after the human masters or take any risks that could endanger his life. Still, he was part of the Black Ink clan, so even if his strength was much weaker than the Black Ink disciple in front of him, a Black Ink disciple was nothing more than a servant in the eyes of the Black Ink clan, regardless of their cultivation. Of course, this woman was a servant converted by a territory lord, so Enyu Yang had to show her a certain degree of respect. Even his inquiring tone was rather polite. The woman said nothing and simply stared at Enyu Yang silently. In the next moment, she stretched out her arm and a long sword immediately appeared in her grip as a shocking light burst forth. The world seemed to lose all its colors at that moment. Enyu Yang's forced smile remained on his face, but his eyes were flooded with a sense of horror and fear. Raising his hand slightly, he pointed at the woman. "You." The words had only just left his mouth when his enormous body suddenly split into two halves. Pitch-black blood and black ink strength exploded to form a black ink cloud. Yang Kai and the others standing nearby were completely stunned. Nobody could have predicted this sudden turn of events. Black ink disciples were the servants of the Black Ink clan after all. No matter how high their cultivation, it was impossible for them to have thoughts of betraying a Black Ink clan. That was why Enyu Yang had been completely caught off guard when this woman walked over to them. Needless to say, with the gap in their strength, there was nothing he could have done to stop her even if he had been on guard. In any case, this situation was totally unexpected. The woman who had just recovered her strength had killed Enyu Yang with a single stroke of her sword. Yang Kai had been praying for Enyu Yang to die as soon as possible so that he could escape, but he never imagined that Enyu Yang would perish just like that. If he had to be honest, he was feeling rather confused. Before he had time to think though, the aura of death suddenly loomed over him. The woman did not stop after killing Enyu Yang and swiftly slashed her sword down on him. Turning pale with shock, Yang Kai immediately summoned the Azure Dragon Spear and thrust forward without any hesitation. There was a loud explosion, followed by an overwhelming force that erupted from before him. Yang Kai felt as though an entire universe world had smashed into him, and his figure was sent flying backwards. A metallic taste flooded his mouth, and the vitality in his chest surged violently. This was the second time he had suffered defeat at the hands of this woman, but a vague speculation formed in his mind at that moment. The woman looked slightly surprised. Yang Kai had escaped from her death blow during the previous raid, and the same thing had occurred again this time. Just as she suspected, this sixth-order Black Ink disciple was truly unusual. On the other side, both B2 and E5 went crazy after witnessing Enyu Yang's death. As Black Ink disciples, their master and the Black Ink clan were supreme. It was their responsibility to ensure the safety of their master. However, Enyu Yang had been killed right under their noses. How could they not be furious? The two of them showed no hesitation whatsoever. One of them blasted a divine ability at the woman while the other lunged forward. His entire figure swelled significantly under the effects of his secret technique. The woman's expression remained indifferent, and the long sword in her hand transformed into a curtain of swords that rained down on B2 and E5 like a storm. With her strength, it would not take much effort for her to kill two sixth-order open heaven realm masters like them. At the critical moment, Yang Kai desperately yelled out, "Senior, 4 universe pillars." Martial Peak, Chapter 4934, Feng Ying. Yang Kai's yell caused the woman's movements to pause slightly. It was precisely because of this momentary hesitation that B2 and E5 survived. Fresh blood splattered everywhere as both of them instantaneously suffered severe injuries and were forced to retreat. However, they were clearly unafraid of death and rushed forward again after being forced to retreat once. The woman frowned slightly and murderous intent blazed brightly in her eyes. She had held back just now because of Yang Kai's yell, but that did not mean she had lost her intention to kill B2 and E5. Human masters who became Black Ink disciples after being corrupted by Black Ink strength were destined to stand on the opposite side as the enemy, and there could be no mercy when dealing with the enemy. That was the lesson learned by the human cultivators after innumerable years on the Black Ink battlefield. It was a lesson they received in exchange for the blood of countless ancestors. Before the woman could attack again though, Yang Kai rushed over in a flash. B2 and E5 were completely focused on the woman, so they were totally defenseless towards him. He easily approached them for that reason and knocked them down, rendering them unconscious rather than killing them. Unfortunately, due to the urgency of the situation, his attacks had been a bit too heavy, so there was a high chance that they would need to recuperate for some time when they woke up. The woman held her long sword in her grip. Watching the scene in front of her, A look of surprise flashed through her eyes. As a black ink disciple, Yang Kai's actions were undoubtedly puzzling. However, if she combined his actions with the words he shouted earlier, a vague speculation formed in her head. Are you not corrupted by the black ink strength? Holding B2 in one hand and E5 in the other, Yang Kai slowly shook his head. I wanted to tell you when I met you for the first time, but I didn't get the chance to speak. You really have one of the 4 universe pillars? The woman raised her eyebrows. I have a world spring. Words are nothing without proof. She did not lower her guard, and a sword wave continued to hum around the longsword in her hand. Yang Kai nodded in acknowledgement and said, Please see for yourself, senior. While speaking, he opened the portal to his small universe. She took a deep look at him before she activated her divine sense and probed the interior of his small universe. A short while later, she withdrew her divine sense, her eyes filled with astonishment. She had certainly seen a clear spring inside Yang Kai's small universe, in addition to the mysterious power that flowed out of it which stabilized his small universe. Thanks to this power, his small universe was not only extremely firm, but also completely impervious to any external forces. She also saw that his small universe had already transformed from immaterial to material, which was what surprised her the most. After all, the young man in front of her was clearly only in the 6th order open heaven realm. Senior, do you also have one of the 4 universe pillars? Yang Kai inquired for verification. If she did not have one of the 4 universe pillars, then how was it possible for her to safely escape from the clutches of a black ink territory lord? The reason she had quietly endured the process and pretended to be corrupted by black ink strength was that she had been running out of strength. If it was discovered that she had one of the 4 universe pillars, she was bound to be killed on the spot. Therefore, she waited until the territory lord departed and she recovered enough before she made her move. Enyu Yang's death was simply collateral damage. He originally thought that staying behind to watch over her would be an easy task because he did not need to confront the human masters, but how could he have known that staying behind was actually the fastest way to die? If Enyu Yang had known that his decision would result in such an outcome, he would never have agreed to stay beside this woman. It was precisely because Yang Kai had such a guess that he shouted at the top of his voice when the woman made her move just now. Unexpectedly though, she slowly shook her head. I don't have one of the 4 universe pillars. The 4 universe pillars are only given to the 8th order masters. I am not qualified enough to own one. Why else did you think that territory lord left without checking my small universe? There had never been a precedent of a 9th order old ancestor becoming corrupted by black ink strength, so there was no need for them to worry about it and thus no reason for them to have one of the 4 universe pillars. 8th order open heaven realm masters were the strongest fighting force below the old ancestors and also the commanders and leaders of the human race army on the black ink battlefield. Hence, a treasure like the 4 universe pillars would naturally be given to them so that they could be used to the fullest. More importantly, they had enough strength to defend themselves on the chaotic battlefield and would not be killed by accident, leading to the loss of the 4 universe pillar they carried. If treasures like the 4 universe pillars were possessed by 6th or 7th order masters, they would be lost if these open heaven realm masters perished on the battlefield. The Black Ink clan was also aware of this point. The humans did not have many 4 universe pillars in their possession, and these treasures were always possessed by 8th order masters. There was no exception to this rule. It was precisely for that reason that the territory lord had left with peace of mind after corrupting the woman with his black ink strength and did not bother to check her small universe. Yang Kai was surprised. How did you resist the corruption of the black ink strength then, senior? When he asked this question, he immediately became vigilant. If this woman had been corrupted by the black ink strength, then the situation in front of him would be very bad. The woman was silent for a moment before she explained. Somebody once planted a secret technique based on the profound fish inside my small universe. It can help me to resist the erosion of the black ink strength once. The profound fish was one of the 4 universe pillars. Yang Kai did not know what kind of secret technique she was referring to and had never heard that the 4 universe pillars could be used to plant such secret techniques. However, this kind of technique would naturally be developed only on the black ink battlefield, so it wasn't surprising for him not to know about it. In order to fight against the black ink strength, It was not surprising for the human masters to create some novel sparks after painstakingly struggling with all their might for countless years. Senior, do you mean to say that the secret technique can protect you only once? She nodded. May I verify the truth? Yang Kai asked in a grim voice. She said nothing and just opened the portal to her small universe. At a time like this, she knew that it was a necessary gesture to gain Yang Kai's trust. In any case, on the black ink battlefield, it was very normal for one small universe to be investigated by others. After a quick investigation, Yang Kai discovered that the woman's small universe certainly did not contain any signs of being corrupted by the black ink strength. There were also no signs of a universe pillar inside either. He couldn't help feeling amazed by his discovery. We can't stay here for long, the woman said softly. Enyu Yang's corpse was suspended there in open view, so if any other black ink clansmen passed by this place, the two of them would have a hard time explaining the situation. While speaking, she glanced at the two black ink disciples in his hand. You can't save them. Just kill them. However, Yang Kai shook his head. If it was just me, then I would not be able to save them. But it's different with you around, Senior. Please put them into your small universe for now. She frowned. Impossible. They are black ink disciples. If I place them in my small universe, I will be in trouble when they regain consciousness. Please wait a moment, Senior. After he said that, Yang Kai's left and right hands suddenly glowed with dazzling light. When he pressed his palms together, the yellow and blue lights merged together to form a pure white light that enveloped both B2 and E5. Sizzling sounds rang out and the expressions of the two unconscious men suddenly twisted in pain. Immediately after that, dense black ink strength seeped out of their bodies and faded into nothingness. Their expressions gradually softened again as the black ink strength dissipated from them. Dismissing the remaining purifying light, Yang Kai nodded at the woman. It's fine now. The woman was flabbergasted by what she just witnessed. Although she had some speculations, she couldn't help feeling incredulous. She took a large step forward and casually grabbed B2's wrist, then she carefully probed his condition. After a while, she stared at Yang Kai as though she was looking at a ghost. What method did you use to dispel the black ink strength? Such a method was completely unheard of and unseen before. She had been fighting the Black Ink clan on the Black Ink battlefield for some 3,000 years now, but she had never even heard of such a technique. I can't explain in such a short time, but this is a unique ability that I have, Yang Kai responded faintly. She didn't know what to say, mainly because Yang Kai had given her too much of a shock. Besides, she had the vague feeling that there would be a huge impact on the battle situation of this unchanging and eternal war if this method was spread. In the past, the Black Ink disciple corrupted by Black Ink strength were destined to be mortal enemies. Any encounters between the human masters and Black Ink disciples would only end with the death of one party or the other. However, there was now a method to restore order from chaos among the Black Ink disciples. If this method was utilized properly, then the losses suffered by the human race would be significantly reduced. Where did this kid come from? Why have I never heard of him before? What's more, he was wandering around alone in the Black Ink clan's territory. Should I say he is ignorant and foolish, or bold and courageous? Not only did he possess one of the 4 universe pillars, but he also had the means to purify and dispel the Black Ink strength. Thus, she suddenly realized that she had picked up an immeasurable treasure. He would be a huge asset to the entire Black Ink battlefield. Upon confirming that all Black Ink strength in B2 and E5 had been purified and dispelled, she did not hesitate to toss the 2 unconscious men into her small universe. Then, she grabbed Yang Kai by the arm. Let's go. Yang Kai did not resist and allowed her to lead him away. Along the way, the woman would glance sideways at him from time to time. Finally, she could not suppress her curiosity any longer and asked, "Which cave heaven or paradise did you come from? What is your name?" Yang Kai was silent. In the end, he answered, "This junior is called Yang Kai. I come from Yin-Yang Cave Heaven." He did not mean to deceive her, but he figured she might not know of Voidland. If he mentioned that name, he would only need to explain even more. He was a 6th-order open heaven realm master who was not from any of the cave heavens or paradises after all. Why would he enter the Black Ink battlefield for no reason? That was a valid point of suspicion, and since this matter was related to the Void Corridor, he could not speak carelessly. He had not forgotten Meng Qi's warning. Aside from the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm old ancestors, no matter who questioned him, he could not reveal the existence of the Void Corridor to anybody. The woman did not seem to think that he was lying. The main reason was that she never expected anybody to lie about their background, so she nodded lightly and said, "Blue Sky Paradise, Feng Ying." Blue Sky Paradise. Yang Kai raised his brow lightly. "Senior, do you know Elder Muzhua?" Muzhua was the foreign affairs envoy from Blue Sky Paradise and was the person in charge of their Dao temple in the Star Boundary. Although Yang Kai was not close with him, they had interacted with each other on multiple occasions. Due to the Star Boundary's world tree, Yang Kai was more or less acquainted with several elders from each of the major cave heavens and paradises, even though his cultivation was low. He was also quite friendly with some of them. There were times when the value of something like personal connections was reflected in such situations. "Muzhua. He is my junior brother. Do you know him?" Feng Ying was a little surprised. Yang Kai answered, "I've met him a few times." Upon hearing his answer, she was tempted to ask why a Yin-Yang Cave Heaven disciple would meet a Blue Sky Paradise elder, let alone several times. However, she was not very familiar with the situation in the outside world after fighting on the Black Ink battlefield for so long. It was meaningless to ask such questions, so she suppressed the curiosity in her heart. On the other hand, Yang Kai suddenly looked around and realized that something was wrong. Taking out his universe chart, he checked his current position and the direction they were heading before exclaiming in astonishment, "Senior, aren't we heading in the wrong direction?" Marshall Peak, Chapter 4935, Quite Strong. It turned out that the direction in which Feng Ying was leading Yang Kai was not heading towards the great pass defended by the cave heavens and paradises. They seemed to be heading in the opposite direction actually, so he was naturally quite confused. Feng Ying explained, "The last operation has undoubtedly provoked the ire of the Black Ink clan. The Black Ink clan army is gathering at the front. We might not be able to break through their lines with just our strength alone. If we go there so recklessly, we will only be walking directly to our deaths. Therefore, our best option is to find as many helpers as possible first." Helpers? Yang Kai raised his eyebrows slightly at those words but soon understood. Black Ink disciples? Feng Ying nodded. "You have the ability to restore their true selves, so as long as we find a few more Black Ink disciples, we might be able to gather a group large enough to create chaos at Black Ink clan army's rear. Only then will we have a chance to return." She originally did not have such a plan. Trapped in the depths of the Black Ink clan's territory alone, Feng Ying had already mentally prepared herself for her death. If not for that, she would not have killed Enyu Yang immediately after recovering her strength. She had no plans of returning alive and simply planned to kill as many Black Ink clansmen and Black Ink disciples as she could, so she would not be dying in vain. It was not until she witnessed Yang Kai's astonishing method to dispel the Black Ink strength that this plan sprang to mind. If they could smoothly implement this plan, then they would have a standing chance to survive and even rescue some Black Ink disciples along the way. However, Yang Kai was an indispensable part of this plan. It was impossible to pull this off without him. Yang Kai immediately understood after listening to her explanation. Looking around for a while, he glanced towards a Black Ink cloud condensed in the void and made a suggestion. "Senior, how about we hide inside the Black Ink cloud over there?" Feng Ying followed the direction of his gaze, and her expression became pensive. "Are you suggesting?" He nodded. "The Black Ink disciples will definitely be traveling together with the Black Ink clan. If we run around like this, even if we encounter Black Ink disciples, we will only cause the Black Ink clansmen traveling with them to become vigilant. If that's the case, it will be difficult for us to take action. However, it will be a different story if we hide inside the Black Ink cloud and emerge when the enemy passes by this area." Pondering in silence after listening to his suggestion, Feng Ying nodded in agreement. "You're right." With her intelligence, she didn't need Yang Kai to explain much for her to understand the various advantages of this method. Unfortunately, there was one problem with this plan. "Can you guarantee my safety?" She was powerful, and the immense heritage of her small universe gave her a certain degree of resistance towards Black Ink strength, Even so, it was impossible for her to remain inside a black ink cloud for an extended period of time. She would eventually fail to withstand black ink strength if too much time passed. "We'll know once we try," Yang Kai declared firmly. Taking the lead, he rushed towards the black ink cloud. It was impossible for him to not be in high spirits right now. He had been trapped in Black Ink Clan's domain for the past 2 years, during which he always had to act with utmost caution, as though he was constantly walking on thin ice. Thus, Yang Kai inevitably felt his blood pumping when doing something so invigorating all of a sudden. A short while later, Yang Kai charged into the black ink cloud with Feng Ying following closely behind. The dense black ink cloud was almost as thick as solid matter. If the two of them hid inside this black ink cloud, random passers-by would not be able to discover their whereabouts without careful investigation. Yang Kai had a world spring, so no matter how impressive the black ink cloud was, it was completely ineffective against him. However, it was different for Feng Ying. She had to use her world force to shield herself the moment she entered the black ink cloud to prevent the black ink strength from corrupting her. Not only would this consume her strength quickly though, she would also risk being corrupted at any moment. Naturally, Yang Kai was prepared well in advance for this situation and released a burst of purifying light to completely dispel the black ink strength around the space where they stood to create a safe zone for them. It was not until then that Feng Ying finally breathed a sigh of relief. Be that as it may, she could not figure out what kind of method Yang Kai was using even though she had carefully observed him when he cast the purifying light. Still, now was not the time to ask such questions, so Feng Ying declared, "Take a rest. We might need to fight at any time." After saying so, she closed her eyes to replenish her strength. Yang Kai had no need to recuperate his strength as the battle earlier had not consumed much of his energy. What's more, he needed to keep a close watch on his surroundings. There were too many uncertain elements in waiting for gains without pains here, so he needed to carefully monitor the outside world for any possible complications that might arise. Time passed slowly and fortunately, their luck was pretty good. Only an hour later, a dozen or so figures flew over from the depths of black ink territory. Yang Kai was the first to notice them and quickly called out, "Senior." Feng Ying opened her eyes and focused her senses in that direction. The black ink cloud formed a barrier that made it difficult for her to look outside, but her divine sense could perceive the situation clearly. Assessing the situation, she reported, 2 feudal lords, 6 high-rank black ink clansmen, and 5 black ink disciples. The situation made her frown slightly. There were quite a few enemies in this group, so it might be difficult for them to handle. Nevertheless, this was the first batch of people to arrive after they started waiting here, so they had to take action. As long as their initial attempts went well, their situation would only get better and better. Feng Ying briefly checked her small universe, but the 2 former black ink disciples she tossed inside earlier had yet to regain consciousness. Yang Kai's previous attack had been rather heavy, so they could not rely on these 2 for help right now. While she was hesitating, Feng Ying heard Yang Kai whisper, "I'll leave the 2 feudal lords to you, senior. I'll deal with the rest." She glanced at him in disbelief. "Are you sure?" After hastily exchanging blows twice with him, Feng Ying knew that Yang Kai was quite strong. Be that as it may, she was not familiar with his true abilities. It was not easy for one person to face 6 high-rank black ink clansmen alone. On top of that, the 5 black ink disciples would not simply stand around doing nothing once the fight broke out. They would surely attack to support their masters. "Rest assured, senior. This junior may be young, but I've experienced many things in life. I won't screw up." Yang Kai licked his lips with an eager expression. Having suppressed himself for so long, he could finally go all out again. Feng Ying hesitated slightly before she nodded, "Be careful. I will dispatch those 2 feudal lords as quickly as possible, then come to help you." Yang Kai nodded in response. Exchanging a glance, the pair rushed out of their hiding spot in the black ink cloud. As soon as the 2 of them emerged from their hiding spot, the black ink clansmen passing by noticed them and numerous gazes immediately turned towards them. Upon seeing that these 2 were humans, the 2 leading feudal lords revealed expressions of pleasant surprise. They exchanged a glance with each other and flew over in tacit agreement. Likewise, Yang Kai and Feng Ying approached the black ink group. Both parties soon came close to each other. One of the feudal lords reached out towards Feng Ying, but in the next instant his body suddenly stiffened without any warning. A sword wave sliced through him, from the top of his head to his crotch. The sharp and unstoppable sword wave broke through his defenses and split his enormous body in two. Feng Ying had made her move. She actually launched her attack even earlier than Yang Kai. Yang Kai had the protection of the world spring, so he could fearlessly allow the black ink strength to pour into his body and make the enemy lower their guard as a result. However, she did not have such luxury. As soon as the feudal lord in front of her reached out towards her, she unleashed a killing move. She was among the strongest 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, and not too long ago, she had slaughtered hundreds of enemies with her strength alone. She not only attacked decisively at this moment, but she also had the element of surprise on her side while striking from point-blank distance. How could the feudal lord defend against her attack? It only took an instant for her to kill the first feudal lord on the spot. Then, without delay, she slashed her sword at the second feudal lord. The second feudal lord happened to be preparing to subjugate Yang Kai at that very moment, so how could he stand a chance against Feng Ying's sudden assault? When the sword wave slashed down, he was chopped in half and died just like that. The two feudal lords perished in an instant. Only then did Feng Ying breathe a sigh of relief, but when she looked over, she was slightly stunned. That was because Yang Kai was standing there with a spear in one hand, a high-rank black ink clansman hanging from its end. With a twist of his arm, the high-rank black ink clansman exploded into mist. As expected, this kid is strong. She had managed to kill 2 black ink clan feudal lords by herself because she had enough confidence in her strength. However, in the short time taken for her to deal with her enemies, Yang Kai had already slain 4 of the high-rank black ink clansmen. Meanwhile, the remaining 2 who were pushed back looked greatly weakened. It was obvious that they were severely injured. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4936, The Prey is Here. How could an ordinary 6th Order master be so fierce? Feng Ying felt she had seen something new today and also had the vague realization that Yang Kai was at the peak of the 6th Order and would soon advance to the 7th Order. It was impossible for him to be so strong otherwise. Despite her swirling thoughts, her movements did not stop for an instant. She was already charging towards the 2 high-rank black ink clansmen who were heavily injured by Yang Kai earlier, and with one swing of her sword, she easily killed them. These 2 high-rank black ink clansmen had been severely injured by Yang Kai when he swept his spear at them, and Feng Ying's attack was sharp and overwhelming. How could they defend themselves? In the blink of an eye, 2 black ink feudal lords and 6 high-rank black ink clansmen perished. Although this was the first time the 2 of them cooperated together in a fight, they seemed as though they had known each other for a long time. There was not the slightest flaw in their cooperation. It was not until this moment that the 5 black ink disciples finally came to their senses. Seeing the tragic deaths of the black ink clansmen around them, these 5 black ink disciples were absolutely enraged. They instantly summoned their respective artifacts and blasted various divine abilities and secret techniques at Yang Kai and Feng Ying. Yang Kai and Feng Ying could not afford to act without restraint when dealing with these 5 black ink disciples, as their current mission was a rescue operation. It went without saying that they could not heavily injure or kill the people they were supposed to save, so their actions were a bit restricted. Yang Kai hastily dodged to avoid a divine ability shooting towards him while simultaneously putting away the Azure Dragon Spear. He then shot towards the nearest black ink disciple. Feng Ying cooperated without any need to discuss matters with him. With a flourish of her long sword, sword light burst forth like a waterfall and enveloped the remaining 4 black ink disciples to restrict their movements and capture their attention. Meanwhile, yellow and blue lights glowed brightly before merging together to form a pure white light that flared brilliantly and engulfed the black ink disciple. The pure and flawless light did not contain the slightest impurity. As the pitch-black filth was expelled from the body of the black ink disciple, his pained expression gradually returned to normal and his violent resistance slowly subsided. Nevertheless, his expression remained confused. Despite being corrupted by black ink strength for all these years, he had not lost his consciousness. He could clearly remember his condition and the things that he experienced during those years. Looking back now, his belief that the Black Ink clan was supreme seemed so foolish and ridiculous. It could be said that his actions had been a complete betrayal of not just his humanity, but even his own convictions. Yang Kai had no time to explain anything in detail, so after nodding at the man lightly, he quickly charged towards Feng Ying. Seeing how swiftly Yang Kai dealt with the Black Ink disciple, Feng Ying immediately withdrew her sword light before sending out another to pin down all but one target. They repeated the same steps over and over again, their cooperation perfectly complementing each other's movements. As a result, it didn't take long for the Black Ink strength to be dispelled from all 5 Black Ink disciples. There were no high-rank Open Heaven Realm Masters among these 5 people. 3 were in the 6th Order, while the remaining 2 were in the 5th Order. That was one of the key reasons why Yang Kai could finish dealing with them so quickly. All 5 of them stared at Yang Kai in stunned disbelief, as though they were trying to find a flower on his face. Feng Ying's previous display had revealed her immense strength, however, they all came from different cave heavens and paradises where countless masters existed, so they were not impressed by raw power alone. Conversely, what grabbed their attention was the method Yang Kai had displayed earlier. As Black Ink disciples who became ordinary humans again, they had personally experienced these changes and held deep feelings towards that pure white light. Does our side have such means now? The 5 of them were genuinely happy from the bottom of their hearts. Since ancient times, any of their comrades who were corrupted by Black Ink strength would stand on the opposite side of the human race and become an irreconcilable enemy. Moreover, it was impossible to rescue them. Now that they had such means, there was no need to reluctantly give up on their comrades whenever one of them became corrupted by Black Ink strength. They could still rescue their comrades if the opportunity arose. That was definitely something that could change the entire tide of the Black Ink battlefield. Although there were many things they wanted to ask, they knew that this was not the place for discussion. They silently cupped their fists at Yang Kai and Feng Ying to indicate their thanks. We cannot stay in this place for long. Enter my small universe, Feng Ying ordered before opening the portal to her small universe. As a 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, it stood to reason that masters below the 7th Order Open Heaven Realm were able to enter her small universe. On the other hand, Yang Kai could only take in those below the 6th Order. The 5 of them nodded and entered the portal leading into Feng Ying's small universe to recuperate without any hesitation. Let's go. Feng Ying called out and took the lead to head in a certain direction. Yang Kai quickly followed behind her. Since they were looking for helpers, then it was only natural to gather as many as possible. Yang Kai did not know what was waiting for them ahead, but since Feng Ying had mentioned that the Black Ink clan army was gathering on the front lines, it would not be easy for them to pass through. Only by gathering enough force would they stand a chance to fight their way through the Black Ink clan army and return to the Great Pass. Half a day later, the pair repeated their earlier actions. Hiding inside a Black Ink cloud, they prepared to wait for fish to swim by once more. Less than a quarter of an hour after they hid, a large Black Ink clan army passed by in the vicinity. There were very many of them, almost 1,000 in total, and the leader had a deep and profound aura. It was highly likely that it was a Black Ink territory lord. Hiding inside the Black Ink cloud, Yang Kai and Feng Ying did not dare to move a single muscle and concealed their auras as much as possible. If they exposed themselves in front of such a strong enemy, they would surely suffer a tragic fate. Fortunately, luck seemed to be on their side today. Although the Black Ink clan army passed close to their position, they did not bother to check the situation inside the Black Ink cloud where they were hiding. In the eyes of the Black Ink clan, Black Ink clouds were extremely common and there was no need to investigate them carefully. Furthermore, they would never have imagined that 2 humans would recklessly hide inside a Black Ink cloud or that these humans could resist the corrosion of the Black Ink strength for an extended period of time. Yang Kai and Feng Ying finally breathed a sigh of relief when the Black Ink clan army disappeared from the scope of their senses. They saw another team of 100 or so passing by after some time, but just as before, they could only remain in hiding. Judging by the current situation, it could be seen that Feng Ying's previous guess was correct. The Black Ink clan was marshalling their army on the front lines. The long-distance raid carried out by the human masters had fully provoked the wrath of the Black Ink clan, so it was obvious that the enemy was planning a large-scale counterattack to take revenge. From time to time, they would see Black Ink clansmen passing by in groups of varying numbers, but even if the numbers were small, these groups weren't targets that they could defeat. The current situation was different from when Feng Ying had previously repelled hundreds of Black Ink clansmen on her own. At the time, she had no other choice but to go all out. She had been prepared to sacrifice herself in order to allow her comrades to escape, so she had fought with reckless abandon in order to drag down as many enemies with her as possible. Now though, the two of them had to move around in secret. All of a sudden, Yang Kai, who had been keeping a close watch on their surroundings, suddenly brightened and whispered, "Senior, our prey is here." Feng Ying glanced at him wordlessly. His statement sounded as though they were bandits who were waiting to ambush unsuspecting travelers. Be that as it may, she could not deny that tempting prey had appeared. They had waited for so long and avoided several Black Ink clan teams during this period, but at this moment, what entered their sight was a group that consisted of only 10 individuals. In addition, this team was heading directly towards them. Although the numbers of this team were similar to their first encounter, the lineup was considerably inferior in terms of strength. There were no feudal lords in this group, only several high-rank and even low-rank Black Ink clansmen. There were not many Black Ink disciples either, only 3 of them. After confirming that there were no other dangers in the vicinity, Yang Kai and Feng Ying no longer hesitated. They rushed out of the Black Ink cloud and charged directly at the oncoming team. What followed was a swift massacre where the opponents were practically powerless to fight back. The Black Ink clansmen were completely obliterated in the blink of an eye, after which Yang Kai used his means to dispel the Black Ink strength from the 3 Black Ink disciples. Once this was done, Feng Ying stuffed them into her small universe so that they could recover their strength. In the 2 months that followed, Yang Kai and Feng Ying wandered around aimlessly. The Black Ink clouds that could be found everywhere became the perfect hiding spots for them, and whenever they came across a suitable opportunity, they would attack. If their opponents were too strong, then they would simply remain in hiding. Their harvest over the past 2 months was bountiful. They slaughtered at least 100 Black Ink clansmen, a number of whom were feudal lords. Moreover, they had rescued some 30 or 40 Black Ink disciples by now. Not every Black Ink clansman had their own Black Ink disciples. In fact, many of the Black Ink clansmen harbored a deep hatred for the human race, and even Black Ink disciples were unbearable to them. Therefore, it was impossible for them to be accompanied by Black Ink disciples. Even more Black Ink clansmen simply never had the opportunity to subjugate their own Black Ink disciples. Enyu Yang, who had 5 Black Ink disciples under his command even though he was only a high-rank Black Ink clansman, could be considered a rare example. If a Black Ink clansman wished to own their own Black Ink disciple, they would either need to buy one at a great cost or subjugate one on the battlefield. Neither of these options were simple for a Black Ink clansman to achieve. Yang Kai and Feng Ying were currently hiding themselves inside a random Black Ink cloud, taking their time to recover their strength after a rather intense battle. A short while later, Yang Kai opened his eyes and looked at Feng Ying. Seeming to sense his gaze, Feng Ying spoke without even opening her eyes, "Speak if you have something to say." He thus asked, "Senior, when are we heading back?" Feng Ying decisively said, "We have too few people. It is dangerous to return like this. At the very least, we should gather 100 comrades before we make an attempt, otherwise, we will only be walking to our deaths." 100 people. Yang Kai was tongue-tied. During the past 2 months that they had been traveling together, they had only managed to rescue 30 or so Black Ink disciples. At this rate, it would take half a year to gather 100 people. "No need to worry," Feng Ying opened her eyes and reassured him, "We didn't have enough strength in the past, so we had to be selective with our targets. Now that we have more manpower, we can take the initiative to attack. If we find the right opportunity, we will be able to progress much quicker." Yang Kai nodded and said nothing more. Since he did not know much about the situation on the Black Ink battlefield, he could only follow her lead. Half a day later, the two of them rushed out of the Black Ink cloud after fully recovering before carefully concealing their figures and searching for a possible target. The Black Ink clan army was gathering up ahead, Therefore, many Black Ink clansmen were constantly rushed towards the front lines from the rear. If the opportunity presented itself, then these scattered Black Ink clansmen would become their prey. And an opportunity came quickly. In the distance, the two of them saw an enormous ship sailing through the void in the direction where all the Black Ink clansmen had been rushing towards during this period. It was undoubtedly heading to the front lines to provide support. To have a flight-type artifact of this magnitude meant that the Black Ink clansmen aboard could not be weak. The owner of this ship had to be a feudal lord at the very least, and one with his own territory at that. Across a large distance, Yang Kai and Feng Ying quietly observed the large ship. They could clearly see many figures swaying about on the ship, a large number of which were Black Ink disciples. "Senior, do you plan to attack that ship?" Yang Kai asked. Feng Ying nodded. "It's a good opportunity." Marshall Peak, Chapter 4937, An Order to Convey. Yang Kai was worried, but, "We don't know what kind of existence is on board that ship. What if there's a territory lord?" Feng Ying shook her head. "That's highly unlikely. 2 months ago, the Black Ink royal lord personally took action. Therefore, all territory lords in the vicinity should already have followed him to the battlefield at the time. Even if they received the news late, they would not have waited until now to set out. That's why there should not be any territory lords among the reinforcements. What's more, the war has begun and territory lords are the backbone of the Black Ink clan. Logically speaking, they should have rushed to the battlefield at the earliest notice. Bringing out a flight-type artifact like this ship to transport manpower indicates that the people on the ship have varying strength, so they have different flying speeds." There was some logic to Feng Ying's statement, so Yang Kai nodded slightly in response. She then added, "Of course, there are always exceptions. If we encounter a territory lord, I will delay them for as long as possible. You should escape immediately." During this period, she had witnessed his ability and recognized his value. A talented individual like Yang Kai could not be killed here, otherwise, the loss to the cave heavens and paradises would be incalculable. She even mentally prepared herself to risk her life in order to create an opportunity for him to escape at a critical juncture. "Let's go." Feng Ying beckoned and charged towards the large ship with Yang Kai in tow. When the two figures appeared without warning, there was an immediate response from the ship. Several figures flew out to stand on the deck and focused their gaze in this direction from a distance. Feng Ying and Yang Kai did not reduce their speed as they flew forward in a straight line. It didn't take long for them to land on the deck. Countless scrutinizing gazes mixed with curiosity turned towards them. At the same time, Yang Kai was also observing them. He discovered that there were no Black Ink disciples in the high-rank open heaven realm here, so he couldn't help sighing in relief. Just as Feng Ying had predicted, these people certainly had varying levels of strength. It would seem that her previous speculations were correct. Feng Ying placed her hand over her chest and glanced at the inside of the cabin. "Who is in charge here?" "Hong Lian Territory Lord has an order to convey." Her words made her seem as though she was Hong Lane Territory Lord's Black Ink disciple. A group of Black Ink disciples on the deck looked around for a while but did not answer. Yang Kai's eyes flickered slightly, admiring Feng Ying's courage and caution. She had used the name Hong Lian Territory Lord. If there was a master on the large ship, he would certainly reveal himself immediately after hearing this name. In that way, they could quickly determine the strength of the enemy and come up with countermeasures. Besides, Feng Ying was a 7th-order open heaven realm master, so it was normal for her to disguise herself as Hong Lian Territory Lord's Black Ink disciple. The dull thud of footsteps soon came from within the cabin. Immediately after that, a tall Black Ink clansman strode out. Yang Kai looked up and saw that this Black Ink clansman was nothing more than a Black Ink feudal lord. The sight immediately filled him with relief. Many feudal lords had died at the hands of Feng Ying during this period, hence, a single feudal lord was not much of a concern. The only thing that bothered him slightly was the Black Ink disciple accompanying the feudal lord. The Black Ink disciple was undoubtedly in the 7th-order open heaven realm and his aura was deep and profound. After appearing on the deck, the feudal lord lowered his head and looked down at Feng Ying and Yang Kai. "I am Xiao Yu feudal lord." What are Sir Territory Lord's orders? He held no suspicion towards Feng Ying's identity, mainly because he did not expect a person to be so bold as to impersonate the Black Ink disciple of a Black Ink clan territory lord in front of him. Feng Ying respectfully said, "Sir, please lean down. Master has commanded that this order can only be relayed to you alone." Xiao Yu feudal lord frowned slightly at those words. Although he did not understand why Hong Lian territory lord would give such an order, he lowered his body slightly, tilted his head to the side, and listened intently. Feng Ying flew forward slightly and whispered, "Master said." Her sentence trailed off. Having piqued his curiosity and caused him to lower his guard, Feng Ying immediately pulled out her sword and slashed at him in the next moment. Pitch-black blood splattered everywhere as Xiao Yu retained his posture of listening intently, but his massive head had already been separated from his neck. Feng Ying's movements did not stop there. She quickly pushed back the Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Black Ink disciple beside the Xiao Yu feudal lord with another slash of her sword. Immediately after that, she opened the portal to her small universe, and dozens of figures, who were raring to go, instantly emerged. The Black Ink disciples, whom Yang Kai and Feng Ying had spent 2 months rescuing, had been recuperating in Feng Ying's small universe all this while. Having long since attained a full recovery, they had nothing to do every day and were practically dying from boredom. Now that they came out from Feng Ying's small universe, they were like fierce tigers coming down the mountain. They immediately summoned their artifacts and unleashed various divine abilities and secret techniques at the Black Ink clan in the surroundings. At this moment, the Black Ink clan were reeling in confusion and shock. They never imagined that they would be ambushed by human masters in such a place, so they immediately suffered heavy casualties. As soon as Feng Ying made her move, Yang Kai also complemented her actions and lunged forward. He ignored the rest of the Black Ink disciples and focused his attention on the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple beside the Xiao Yu feudal lord. At present, it was still unclear how many on the ship could rival a Seventh Order master in strength. However, Xiao Yu feudal lord had been eliminated, so as long as this Seventh Order Black Ink disciple was dealt with, they could stabilize the entire situation. At the same time that Yang Kai lunged forward, the Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Black Ink disciple who was repelled by Feng Ying earlier rushed forward aggressively. In the eyes of a Black Ink disciple, it did not matter whether or not Feng Ying had been sent by Hong Lian territory lord, he had to take revenge after witnessing the tragic death of his master that occurred right in front of his eyes. Feng Ying had not lowered her guard against him, of course, and after releasing her allies from her small universe, she raised her sword and charged at him. Be that as it may, Yang Kai was faster than her. He sprang out from behind her and swung his fist at the Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Black Ink disciple. A cold light flashed in the opponent's eyes and the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple raised his palm towards Yang Kai. World force surged violently from the palm of his hand, like a tsunami. He seemed determined to kill Yang Kai with a single strike. "Be careful," Feng Ying exclaimed in horror. She never expected Yang Kai to be so reckless. In her original plan, she would pin down any Seventh Order masters or feudal lords herself, while Yang Kai only needed to go and rescue the subjugated Black Ink disciples. How could she have imagined that this brat would target the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple on his own? She didn't even have time to stop him. Swiftly though, she recalled that Yang Kai had managed to block 2 of her killing moves in the past and felt slightly more relieved. He would not die so easily. When the 2 attacks collided with each other, world force exploded and Yang Kai's figure was sent flying backwards. Still, the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple was stunned as a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. His strength might not be at its peak, but his order was not something that could be ignored. Even so, an opponent who was 1 order lower than him had successfully defended against his attack. He couldn't help feeling astonished. If it was a one-on-one battle, now would be the best time to hunt down Yang Kai. However, Yang Kai had only just been thrown off when Feng Ying approached. Her long sword transformed into sword shadows that covered the entire sky and slashed down on the Black Ink disciple. In that instant, the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple immediately fell into a precarious situation. Feng Ying was extremely powerful and even at his peak, he might not have been her opponent, what more in his current situation. In just a few blows, He was cornered to the point where he could only parry her attacks and was powerless to fight back. Furthermore, he could not break free of her suppression no matter how hard he struggled and resisted. Yang Kai, who had been forced back just now, returned and joined forces with Feng Ying. Their combined efforts left the Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Black Ink disciple increasingly helpless to fight back. Yang Kai was extremely agile, his figure flitting around erratically, causing great trouble to his opponent. Moreover, the flickering white light in the palm of his hands filled the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple with an instinctive sense of fear. The Seventh Order Black Ink disciple had never seen such pure white light before. Even though he did not know what kind of attack that was, the black ink strength in his body transmitted a message of fear and horror to him as though it had met its natural enemy. As a result, his already precarious situation became even more unbearable. It didn't take long before Yang Kai found an opportunity to approach the enemy. He shot forward and pressed his palm against the back of the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple. A pure white light flared brightly and enveloped the Black Ink disciple. Following a series of sizzling sounds, the black ink strength was dispelled and dissipated into nothingness. Accordingly, the resistance of the black ink disciple gradually subsided. A short while later, Yang Kai stopped and nodded at Feng Ying. Then, he hastily rushed towards the nearest black ink disciple. The dozen or so Open Heaven Realm Masters previously released by Feng Ying were currently fighting an intense battle on the ship's deck. In such a short span of time, several people had already lost their lives. Their deaths went to show the ferocity of the battle, but the main reason was that their actions were restricted to a certain degree. Not to mention, their numbers were fewer than their opponents. They had not been able to take an accurate accounting earlier, so it was not until this moment that they realized there were some 300 people aboard this ship. Among them, only a few dozen or so were Black Ink disciples. The others were Black Ink clansmen. While they were merciless towards the Black Ink clan, they had to hold back against the Black Ink disciples as unlike before, they could no longer just kill them. Following the commotion of the battle, the Black Ink disciples and the Black Ink clansmen below deck emerged in twos and threes. It was fortunate that the enemies did not emerge all at once, otherwise, they were bound to suffer heavy casualties at first encounter if they challenged 300 enemies directly with only a few dozen people on their side. After the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple was rescued, Feng Ying immediately moved to block the hatch. She slaughtered all the Black Ink clansmen who came her way, allowing Yang Kai to move freely and display his abilities. Roaming around the battlefield with purifying light blooming from his hands, he helped the Black Ink disciples return to their true natures. Every Black Ink disciple he rescued was equivalent to increasing the strength of his side while simultaneously weakening the strength of the enemy. As the battle dragged on, they gradually gained the upper hand. There was something else that delighted Yang Kai. Aside from the Xiaoyu feudal lord and the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple accompanying the former, the large ship did not seem to contain any other personnel who could rival a high-rank Open Heaven Realm Master in strength. As a result, the situation became better and better for them. Now that the Seventh Order Black Ink disciple had been rescued, there was no need for further discussion. He immediately understood what he needed to do and cooperated with Yang Kai to subdue the remaining Black Ink disciples. The Black Ink clansmen died at a steady pace. Unfortunately, Black Ink strength that dissipated from the corpses was extremely troublesome to deal with. This couldn't be helped. Although the Black Ink disciples had been rescued by Yang Kai, they could easily be corrupted by Black Ink strength once more, therefore, they had to avoid Black Ink strength at all times. Some who had their small universe invaded by Black Ink strength again had no choice but to rush to Yang Kai's side and ask for treatment. Naturally, Yang Kai did not refuse anybody who came to him. During the 2 years he served under Enyu Yang, Yang Kai had learned quite a lot about the Black Ink clan and Black Ink disciples even though he had been living in disguise. As such, he knew that almost all of the Black Ink disciples who had been corrupted by Black Ink strength had sacrificed parts of their small universe at least twice before they were converted. The first time they were eroded by the Black Ink strength, they would always choose to sacrifice a part of their small universe to preserve their sense of self. Marshall Peak, Chapter 4938, One Man Can Turn the Tide. The integrity of one's small universe was extremely important to an open heaven realm master because their small universe served as the source and foundation of their strength. Once their small universe was damaged, their strength would definitely decline. Moreover, as a result of their incomplete small universe, further improvement in their cultivation would become impossible. Therefore, no open heaven realm master would willingly sacrifice a part of their small universe unless they had no other choice. Unfortunately, it was impossible to dispel the black ink strength from their small universe once it was corroded by it. Their only option was to sacrifice the part of their small universe that had been corrupted in order to retain their clarity and maintain their true nature. The human race masters had contended and fought against the Black Ink clan on the Black Ink battlefield since ancient times. There were bound to be people who were forced to give up part of their small universe in every battle. For that reason, the resolution to make a prompt decision was something their ancestors had repeatedly cautioned all of them about before they stepped onto the Black Ink battlefield. If they did not wish to be corrupted by Black Ink strength and lose their autonomy, then they had to be willing to make sacrifices. If they were destined to be killed by their enemies, then they should strive to drag their enemies down with them. At every great pass, these were the two warnings that the seniors would always repeat to their juniors who just arrived on the battlefield. In many cases, sacrificing a part of their small universe would allow them to retain their sense of self and prevent them from being corrupted by Black Ink strength. However, doing so would cause their small universe to become damaged. Not only would their strength decline, but their incomplete small universe would also make it harder for them to resist the erosion of the Black Ink strength if they were subjected to it in the future. Relatively speaking, the amount of time which an open heaven realm master could resist the corrosion of the Black Ink strength was different between open heaven realm masters with complete small universes and open heaven realm masters with incomplete small universes. An open heaven realm master with a complete small universe would be able to persist for a much longer time. When subjected to the corrosion of the Black Ink strength, an open heaven realm would be able to sacrifice part of their small universe the first time. Unfortunately, their success rate would be uncertain on the second attempt. Nevertheless, there would always be instances where the situation was impossible to prevent. That was why almost all the Black Ink disciples corrupted by the Black Ink clan generally had an incomplete small universe. When they were corroded by the Black Ink strength, they had already done their best to prevent the situation from occurring. After all, they did not wish to be converted into a Black Ink disciple either. That was the case for Meng Qi from Exquisite Paradise, whom Yang Kai met previously. Yang Kai had also noticed the same pattern among all the Black Ink disciples he fought in the gambling arena. Even B2, D4, and E5 were no exceptions. That was especially true for D4. Although he was only in the 5th Order Open Heaven realm at the moment, he had said that he used to be in the 6th Order Open Heaven realm. He was once the elite disciple of a certain cave heaven or paradise, but he had been invaded by the Black Ink strength. As a result, he was repeatedly forced to sacrifice parts of his small universe. That was the reason why his cultivation declined and he eventually regressed to the 5th Order. Generally speaking, almost all of the Black Ink disciples could be considered pseudo-open heaven realm masters. It was not to say that they were no longer open heaven realm masters. Having split heaven and earth apart in their bodies to form their small universe, they could be classified as open heaven realm masters. It was just that their small universes were no longer perfect, so the strength of the Black Ink disciples would never reach the normal standards among cultivators of the same order. Take Meng Qi for example. He could be considered a pseudo-7th Order open heaven realm master. Although he was much stronger than the average 6th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, he was pitifully weak compared to ordinary 7th Order Masters. On the other hand, B2 and E5 could be considered pseudo-6th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. All the people Yang Kai and Feng Ying rescued while wandering around for the past 2 months were Black Ink disciples. Needless to say, none of these Black Ink disciples possessed a complete small universe. Many Black Ink clansmen had been slaughtered in this battle. Following the death of these Black Ink clansmen, Black Ink strength that dissipated from their corpses would gather together to form a cloud. In this way, it was very easy for the Open Heaven Realm Masters to become corrupted by the Black Ink strength again. Thanks to their prior experience of being rescued though, These people immediately rushed over to Yang Kai as soon as they discovered that their small universe was being corroded by black ink strength so that he could help them dispel it. Combined with the black ink disciples who originally needed rescue in the first place, Yang Kai was overwhelmed for a time. It was fortunate that Feng Ying and the newly rescued 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master were relatively strong. In addition, the large ship also lacked the corresponding high-end combat power to deal with them. As the two of them rushed back and forth, the Black Ink clan suffered countless casualties. As such, the situation slowly stabilized. Seeing the strength of the human race masters, the surviving Black Ink clansmen knew that they were no match for the enemy and immediately dispersed in all directions. Feng Ying's gaze sharpened at the sight and she shouted in an authoritative voice, "Don't let a single one escape." Leading a team of people, she pursued the fleeing Black Ink clansmen. Likewise, the other 7th Order Master chased down the others fleeing in the opposite direction. They had been causing a storm in the Black Ink clan's territory, and the main reason they managed to stay safe until now was that they had never revealed their existence before. All this while, they had ruthlessly silenced all Black Ink clansmen that they encountered and rescued all the Black Ink disciples they came across. If news of their activity were to leak though, the Black Ink clan would surely take countermeasures against them. If that were to happen, they would be helpless to resist with the strength of so few people. Therefore, all the Black Ink clansmen here had to die. Only the dead could be trusted to keep secrets. The Black Ink clansmen fled in a very scattered manner, so some still managed to slip through the net even with two 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters chasing after them. Naturally, everybody else quickly split up to hunt down these fleeing Black Ink clansmen. Yang Kai did the same and took the lead in the pursuit. His figure latched onto the tail of several Black Ink clansmen like a leech, and he manipulated space principles from afar to stall them. The Black Ink clansmen who were fleeing desperately immediately felt as though they had fallen into a quagmire. The more they struggled, the stiffer their bodies became. When he got closer, Yang Kai summoned the Azure Dragon Spear. The Black Ink clansman perished with a stab of his spear. Afterwards, his figure moved around the void as he stopped several others from fleeing. He killed every one of them and finally took a look around him. The originally chaotic battlefield had calmed down. A short while later, everybody returned to the ship once more to count their casualties. The results were not too bad. Although they lost some people, they gained even more. Their lineup had increased to around 80 people, and they even gained an additional pseudo 7th Order Master. The large ship had been reduced to tatters during the battle earlier. This was just a simple flight-type artifact after all. Even though the ship had some defensive abilities, they were not deployed during the previous battle. What's more, it might not have made a difference even if the defenses had been deployed. The fallout of the attacks from so many Open Heaven Realm Masters was extremely brutal, and a flight-type artifact of this caliber was incapable of enduring such impact. Feng Ying was very decisive and directly destroyed all the evidence lest the Black Ink clan passing by this area noticed that something was wrong. Only then did she turn to the others and said, "Everyone, enter my small universe. We can talk about the rest later." It was too conspicuous for such a large group of humans to gather together. Besides, it was inconvenient for them to move swiftly with their varying strengths. It would be more convenient and safer for them to hide in Feng Ying's small universe. Everybody knew that this was not the place for discussion, so despite the questions in their hearts, they entered her small universe in successive order. It didn't take long before only Yang Kai, Feng Ying, and the pseudo 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master remained. "Let's go," Feng Ying ordered and took the lead to head in a certain direction. Yang Kai and the pseudo 7th Order Master followed behind her. A quarter hour later, a dense patch of black ink clouds came into view. Feng Ying turned to look at Yang Kai with an inquiring gaze and Yang Kai nodded lightly in response. Then, the three figures headed straight towards the thickest black ink cloud. The pseudo 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Master looked doubtful as black ink clouds were not something humans would approach carelessly. That was especially true in his current condition. His small universe had flaws in it, so this black ink cloud was an extremely dangerous threat to him. However, considering the means Yang Kai displayed earlier, he said nothing and simply followed close behind. Soon, the three of them plunged into the black ink cloud. Yang Kai immediately created a safe area inside the black ink cloud, and the pseudo-seventh order master finally calmed down. Blue Sky Paradise, Feng Ying. Feng Ying turned to the pseudo-seventh order open heaven realm master, cupped her fist slightly, and introduced herself. Yang Kai followed suit. Yin-Yang Cave Heaven, Yang Kai. The pseudo-seventh order open heaven realm master returned the greeting and solemnly introduced himself. Myriad Transformations Paradise, Shen Ao. After introducing himself, he turned to Yang Kai with a serious look. I will never forget your saving grace. In the future, please feel free to speak if you have anything you need, little brother. This Shen will not refuse as long as it is within my ability. Yang Kai waved his hand dismissively. It's just a minor matter. You are being too polite, senior. Shen Ao shook his head solemnly. I have been living in a fog for hundreds of years and finally regained my clarity today. I will forever remember this kindness. He continued with a look of curiosity. Since when did we obtain such means? For countless years, it had always been impossible to rescue a black ink disciple who was corrupted by black ink strength. Be that as it may, the method that Yang Kai displayed earlier had rescued all the black ink disciples who survived. It was obvious that the black ink strength in their bodies had been dispelled and purified. Therefore, Shen Ao couldn't help feeling extremely curious and a little excited. Just like Feng Ying, how could he fail to realize the immense value of this technique? Feng Ying explained, this method is not something everybody can use. It is a unique ability that belongs only to this kid. I myself have only learned about it recently. Surprised, Shen Ao looked at Yang Kai and asked, is this a secret technique or a divine ability? Can other people cultivate it? Yang Kai paused for a moment before he answered quietly, it can be regarded as a secret technique, but nobody else can cultivate it. Shen Ao did not understand, if it is a secret technique, then why can't others cultivate it? The cave heavens and paradises are filled with talented people. I'm sure there will be people among them who can succeed, even if the number is small. Similarly, Feng Ying looked at Yang Kai with curiosity. If she had to be honest, she had been extremely curious about Yang Kai's methods throughout the duration of their travels. Although there were many times when she wanted to ask about it, she could not bring herself to do so. After all, Yang Kai seemed reluctant to say much about it. If she tried to get to the bottom of this matter, she would be suspected of trying to infringe upon his privacy. At this moment, Shen Ao had asked the questions that Feng Ying wanted to ask. If this method could be spread to the public, the situation on the black ink battlefield would surely change drastically. Yang Kai shook his head and explained, I'm afraid Senior has misunderstood the situation. Although I can use this method, I did not cultivate this power myself. It was granted to me by someone else. While saying so, he activated the seals on his left and right hands. The seal on his left hand was like a bright great sun, while the one on his right was a brilliant blue moon. Feng Ying and Shen Ao looked on in amazement. These two marks are the foundation of that secret technique. It is not this junior's ability. Moreover, the ones who gave me these two marks are not on the black ink battlefield. After listening to his explanation, the other two couldn't help but look disappointed. Nevertheless, they could detect a trace of the terrifying aura that came from these marks and were certain that the ones who gave him these two marks were beings that should not be provoked. Shen Ao was silent for a moment before he patted Yang Kai on the shoulder. You need to protect yourself well. You can turn the tide of this war with your strength alone. That statement was so exaggerated that Yang Kai couldn't help feeling embarrassed. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.